Hello, everyone. Nice to see you on my channel, Touching Stories. Today you will hear an amazing story that is based on real events. It's a drama that will be a very important lesson for everyone.
Sentence. It's a verdict. Miracles don't happen, not with her. They say miracles happen when you believe in them. Veronica was skeptical of these words. She had always been a realist, and these tales of miraculous healing were just fairy tales to her and nothing more. She didn't want to die. And who wants to die at 40? And at 80 she didn't want to die, but she wouldn't know about it because she wouldn't live to be 80 as she had planned. Funny, planned? As if one could plan death. But as they say, it would be funny if it weren't so sad. God only knows how long she has left. Even doctors can't always predict how much time a person with oncology has left. And Veronica has oncology. When she was washing in the shower, she accidentally found a lump in her breast. She knew that at her age there can be diffuse changes in the mammary glands, but cancer. Veronica didn't yet feel that she had this beast living inside her that would soon be tearing her body apart in pain. At the time of the examination, she had no pain. She had not lost weight, and her complexion had not changed like cancer patients. But the results of the puncture were positive. The tumor was malignant, and there were metastases in the axillary lymph node. Veronica was in shock, not panic, but shocked that she had to get over and give or not give consent for the surgery to remove the breast and lymph node. She could not decide to operate, not because she was afraid to lose her breasts. There is nothing to lose, the first size. Even no one will notice the changes with her gorgeous bust. She was afraid of pointless, painful operations, radiation, chemotherapy, the struggle for life, which life is not called life, and the result is one death. Isn't it better to live the rest of your life without the agony of medical intervention? I don't know, Archie said indifferently. It's your breast. You decide what to do with it. Veronica looked at her husband and wondered how she had lived so many years with this infantile man, not even a man, an amoeba in tights with outstretched knees, who hides in her apartment, here on the sofa, and slides off it only to cook some food, eat, go to the toilet, and wash twice a week. He didn't want to work, because when he got a job under Veronica's pressure, he was asked to quit after a couple of weeks. Who needs a lazy man who swings rights and forgets his responsibilities? Veronica looked into her husband's indifferent eyes and said, I didn't expect any other answer. You've never, ever taken any responsibility. Do you realize that I will soon die? Veronica flared up. Who will feed you, freak? You're not going to die? Archie said indifferently. People like you don't die early. It's people like you that drive people to their graves. Until I die, you'll live. How many times had Veronica tried to get rid of the leech husband who sucked on her and lived off her? She suddenly realized that before her death, she can do everything that before, for whatever reason, did not allow herself to do, and decided to start it today, right now. Her first wish was to get rid of her shameful husband. Veronica realized that when the disease will progress, it will no longer work, and this irritant Archie, she does not need here. Get up, Veronica shouted, pushing her husband off the couch. Get your things and go to your mother. I don't need you here. I want to die in peace. You're completely mad, Archie said, getting up off the floor. Sick people don't act like that. Is that a reason to put me out on the street? I'm going to call Julia now. That won't do you any good. Call whoever you want, the president himself. You're leaving tonight. Veronica heard him calling Julia and almost crying into the phone. Daughter, I don't know what's going on with my mother. She's ready to kill me if I don't leave her. Apparently, Julie calmed him down and told him that she would soon come to deal with Veronica, because after talking to his daughter, he calmed down and began to pack his things, putting them in his suitcase and travel bag. He always did this when Veronica asked him to leave. He put the suitcases together for extra tragedy, so his daughter could see that he couldn't change anything and was ready to leave. Julia would come and talk her mother out of hurting her father, crying and begging for his pardon. Julia loved her father. Sometimes it seemed to Veronica that she loved him even more than he loved her. Pitied the daughter for this Nakamish. Veronica, watching her daughter suffer, felt sorry for her and put off banishing the lazy man from her apartment. It wouldn't happen today. Today, Archie would definitely be removed to his mom's place. Wow, how many rags bought with my money, Veronica marveled. She shook his things out of the suitcase and bag, and Archie smiled, thinking he was forgiven. The bag and suitcase are mine, and they don't come cheap, Veronica said, so put your belongings in plastic bags or bags. Archie didn't expect that. He had to bring garbage bags from the kitchen and put his things in them. Julia didn't enter the apartment. She flew in. "Mommy, you're being a baby, aren't you?" "What is it again, Mommy? Please calm down. Why would Daddy go out? You've lived together for so many years. You can't be without each other." Veronica looked at her daughter, at her husband. Such fatigue came over her. She was ready to leave everything as it was. But when she thought that she would die next to indifference, the determination in her raged with greater force. "Ridiculous," said Veronica. "Julia, it's he who can't do without me, because he lives at my expense, and I'll be glad not to see the creature." "Mommy, I feel sorry for Daddy." "You do? Take him to your house and feel sorry for him all you want, but I've had enough. I've had enough of putting up with him all these years because of you. Now I'm done. Goodbye." "Mom, what are you doing? Calm down. Let's talk and come to a reasonable conclusion. Where am I taking Dad? I don't know how Mickey's gonna see it." "Take him to his mommy. Let me die in peace." Julia didn't react to her mother's words about dying. She thought it was said in her heart for general tragedy. "Take him, Julia, and come back. I need to talk to you." Archie stood dumbfounded by his wife's determination. "Well, do I still have to take out your rags?" shouted Veronica. "Take your bags and bring them to Julia's car. There will be no mercy, or I'm not responsible for myself." "Mom, I don't recognize you. I didn't expect you to do something like this," Julia said, and taking one of the bags with her father's belongings, she said, "Come on, Dad, I'll take you to Grandma." When the door closed behind Julia and her husband, Veronica sighed. She opened the window in Archie's room, wanting to get his spirit out. Veronica lay down on the couch that was always occupied by her husband and listened to herself. Her head pounded and her temples squeezed, her hands trembled and fatigue. Such fatigue overcame her. Here are the first signs of illness, Veronica thought, but freedom. The number one irritant had disappeared from her life. She would have lived a new life. She was still young, but it was too late. Even for the young, it was too late. She didn't realize she had dozed off and woke up to the sound of the key turning in the lock. Veronica looked up to see who was entering the room, saw Julia and cried. "Mommy, Mommy," rushed to her daughter. "Mommy, is it true? Daddy said you made up that you had cancer, but I don't believe you made it up." "I didn't make it up," Veronica said tiredly. "I have cancer. I have to have an operation to remove a breast and a lymph node, and then the next stages of treatment, and I don't know whether to agree to it or to live the rest of my life to the fullest." "Of course you do," Julia replied and hugged her mother. "Of course you do. You have to fight. My poor Mommy, you have to fight. I will do everything in my power to make you well. Mommy, I don't understand why you kicked Daddy out. Some kind of support." "Julia, can't you see how indifferent he is to everything that happens to me? He doesn't even believe I'm sick. Just for your sake, I put up with him for so many years, and now, when I think that I'll be dying, and this indifferent body will lie here on the couch and stupidly watch TV, sure, in the kitchen and in the toilet. No, Julia, I want to live the rest of my life the way I want to live it." At work, Veronica decided not to tell anyone about her illness. She did not want to be pitied, climbing to her with questions and knowing about her illness, waiting for her to retire from work to take her place. During the surgery, she decided to take a labor leave and 2 weeks off, which had accumulated over 3 years. The boss joked, "You, Veronica, have decided to go on a spree, just like the last time." And most likely, the last time, thought Veronica, but the boss, she smiled and said, "I decided to go to my mom, to the village. She misses me without me, and I need to help her." For Harry, parents, family is sacred. So as soon as he heard about his mother, immediately, without delay, signed Veronica's application. Veronica had worked at the firm of this red-haired Jew or German, but according to her passport, for 17 years and had never asked for a raise. Relative to the other workers in the department, she received the least and was embarrassed to ask for a raise. Veronica was always stopped by her modesty and the fact that this red-headed prick could say that if she was not satisfied, she could quit. This had happened to some employees before, so Veronica was afraid to take the risk, but now she could afford it. She was going to die soon. If now this pot-bellied freak refuses her a raise, she has nothing to lose. She would gladly spit in his fat face. It's too much. She'll just send him to the place where Makar did not chase the cows. She has money, which she has been saving for 4 years for a major repair of the apartment. She doesn't need it now, and if she loses her job, she'll have enough to last her till she dies. Harry, I want to ask you to add to my salary, said Veronica and blushed thickly. The red-haired prick took a wait-and-see attitude and remained silent. I've never asked you to do that, and I'm offended that I've been working for you for so many years, and I get the least. I thought that if you don't ask for a raise, then you are satisfied with such a salary, answered the cunning Jew of German origin. I'm not, and I thought that you should evaluate the labor of your employees. And to ask, everyone asks, and whom I value, I add to them. You ask, too, who's stopping you? What an asshole, Veronica thought. I have to fall on my knees and beg him. She decided to be more assertive and, if anything, send him away. Veronica decided not to beg, but to demand. I wish you'd give me a raise after all. How much do you want? The boss asked in a businesslike manner. Veronica decided not to be petty, impudent, so to the end. 25%, she said, and looked into Harry's yellow, greasy eyes. That's quite a grab you've got there, the boss grinned. What? No. Veronica's mouth watered. She wanted to spit in her boss's haughty face, but she couldn't believe what she heard. Good, Veronica, good. Considering that for all the years of your work, I have not increased your salary, I am ready to increase it by 25%. Have a good vacation, Veronica. After your vacation, I'll be waiting for you with renewed vigor. Good day, said the boss, signaling that the audience was over. Jess. As she walked away from Harry, Veronica said to herself, another victory. She spent the rest of the working day in high spirits, and as it was customary in their department, the end of the last working day before vacation, it was customary to make a toast. The men of the department bought alcohol and Veronica ordered delivery of various appetizers. It was Friday, the last day of the week, so the feast lasted until almost 12 at night. Those who didn't drink alcohol left on their own wheels, and those who did ordered a cab. Anthony, can you give me a ride home? Veronica asked the head of her department. I'm in a cab, said Anthony. Well, I'm coming with you. Anthony wanted to say that they were not on their way at all, but did not take offense at the vacationer's refusal. All right, Anthony said, let's go. In the cab, Anthony wanted to sit in the front seat next to the driver, but Veronica suddenly changed to you and said, sit next to me, please. He was a little taken aback by Veronica's request, first the ride home, even though their houses were on opposite sides of town from each other, and now he had to sit next to her. Anthony thought that Veronica had had too much to drink and now decided to get naughty and chose him to do it. But okay, you would put up with these antics. And Veronica had a little too much to drink. She just doesn't have much time and only she knows about it. Even though Anthony is 4 years younger than her and has a young wife who, like her Julia, is 20, Veronica doesn't care about that tonight. She had always dreamed of kissing Anthony. His plump lips beckoned Veronica, especially with her couch duckling. She hadn't kissed him in ages, and she hadn't kissed anyone at all. Now I'll kiss him, and I can die, Veronica thought, and to hell with it, I don't care what he thinks of me. I'll probably never see him again. Walk me to the front door, Veronica said as the cab stopped outside her house. Anthony got out and followed Veronica like a slaughter, doing her antics. Why don't you look alive, Veronica said, turning to face him. Anthony, we're alive. You see, we're still alive. He didn't understand. He didn't understand her at all. He didn't understand what he was doing here, outside her house. Good night, Veronica, he said, and was about to leave. Wait, Veronica said. She came close to him, put her arms around him and kissed him on the lips. He was confused at first, but then he put his arms around Veronica and returned her kiss. They stood there and Veronica could not tear herself away from Valeria's lips. She didn't know how long they would have stood like that, but a cab driver honked at them. Veronica pulled away from Anthony. Thank you for not pushing me away. Goodbye, Anthony. Veronica smiled, opened the door and left. In the morning, she woke up and remembered that Archie wasn't around. The kiss with Anthony had been so sweet, and the red-haired prick hadn't been stingy, had given her a raise. It had all been happiness, if it hadn't been for her illness. Her illness has pushed her to all of this, and she does what she wishes to do. Veronica always wanted to cut her hair short, but her mom was against it and talked her into it. Daughter, you have such beautiful hair, you don't need to cut it off. You are so beautiful, and if you cut your hair short, you will look like a boy. Veronica listened to her mother, but now she listens only to herself. She will go to the salon today and make the shortest and most fashionable haircut, especially if she will do chemotherapy. her hair will start to fall out. So at least now she will go with a haircut that she always dreamed of. Veronica liked her new haircut very much. It even made her look younger. But on Monday, she was going to go to the oncology center and she decided to prepare the things she would need there. She put everything she needed on the table, and then when she was sure she had everything she needed, she packed it in her gym bag, or maybe she needed to buy something else. She had one more day tomorrow. The doorbell rang, and then there was a loud banging on the door. Julia has a key to the door, Veronica thought. Who could it be? Veronica barely had time to turn the key in the lock, and her mother-in-law flew into the apartment. She looked at her daughter-in-law and asked, "Did you get a haircut?" "Hello to you too, Lucy. Yes, I got a haircut." Veronica wanted to ask her mother-in-law to come into the room, but Lucy didn't need it. She rushed past Veronica and plumped on the sofa that had been sold by her Archie, looked disapprovingly at the table where Veronica had put the hospital supplies, at the travel bag under the table. She waved her mother-in-law's head in the direction of the table. "To the resort, to the oncology center." "Veronica, I didn't come here to argue with you. Let's talk as woman to woman, as mother to mother. I'm not arguing with you. I'm telling you that I'm going to the oncology center for surgery. That cancer legend is for Archie. I, as a woman, understand you. My son is not super macho, and you're a young woman, and you need some colorful impressions, and you could go to your resort. But why throw Archie out like an unnecessary rag to me, to an old, sick woman? Veronica, I can't handle him." "And he is a rag," Veronica replied calmly. "I've been pulling him for so many years, and I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm sick, and soon I won't be able to work, and I won't be able to afford him. And then I don't want to tolerate his presence when I'm lying here helpless, dying." Her mother-in-law sighed and looked at Veronica incredulously. Her throat was dry. "God, what's going on?" Lucy said tiredly. "Would you like some tea?" Veronica asked. "Yes, with pleasure," replied her mother-in-law. "I haven't had a dewdrop in my mouth today. I'm all nervous." They went into the kitchen. Veronica put the kettle on the stove and took out a Napoleon cake and eclairs from the refrigerator. "Wow," exclaimed Lucy, "as soon as you sent your husband away, so you started to buy different delicious things." "I can afford it. Everything that I used to forbid myself, now I allow everything. There's no point in saving my figure, my health. I'm going to die soon, so my last months and days, I want to enjoy life." The mother-in-law didn't seem to hear Veronica. She kept blowing her own horn. "So you used Archie, and now you don't need him?" Sipping her tea, the mother-in-law said. "It was he who used me all my life." "Enjoying eclairs," replied Veronica. "And how did I use him?" "I don't understand." "Who's your daughter by?" "Julia is Archie's." "What am I wrong?" "That's all I took advantage of. It could have been any other man. You can take advantage of anyone and not have to carry him around for the rest of your life." "Veronica, a lot of women don't even have a husband like Archie. He doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, he cooks. He even brings you slippers when you come home from work. I've seen it. Don't tell." Suddenly, the mother-in-law's tone got a little high. "It would be better if he did not bring me slippers and the salary," Veronica parried. "And what he cooks, it is the same and eats. I do not eat his cooking, and he cooks with food bought with my money. I can see we're not gonna come to an agreement. You won't give Archie back." "No," Veronica said firmly. "Have pity on me, Veronica. Who's gonna feel sorry for me? Can you hear me? I may be dead soon." Her mother-in-law looked at her incredulously and said, "Well, if you're dying anyway, what do you care who lives in your apartment? Let Archie live." Veronica raised her eyebrows in surprise. "I don't need him here. And even if he lives here after I'm dead, what will he live on? You want me to pin this bum on Julia?" "It's all right," she's his daughter. "Children are supposed to help their parents. Let him help you. He's your son. Or maybe you'll die and he'll find a decent woman," my mother-in-law said snidely. "Not enough decent women in my apartment for Julia to fight with. I've already filed for divorce, and he, after my death, in this apartment will be nobody and his name will be nothing. Julia and my mom are the only heirs. And then if I died, if Julia wants to let him live here, it's her right. But now, I have no time." Veronica stood up, letting her mother-in-law know that the conversation with her was over. She went into the hallway and opened the front door. "God will judge you," said her mother-in-law as she walked away. "God is the judge of all," Veronica replied. Lucy took the elevator down and met Julia at the entrance. "Hi, Grandma," Julia said and kissed Lucy on the cheek. Granddaughter, Lucy wailed, "What's going on? What is your mother doing? They're going to put me and your father in the grave. You should talk to her so she can bring your father home." "What am I going to do with him? We won't survive on my pension." "I already talked to my mom, Grandma. She doesn't want to hear about it. Maybe she'll come home from the hospital and soften up. Then I'll talk to her. So she says she's already filed for divorce." "I didn't know," Julia replied. "Maybe Dad will realize that you can't live on your pension and go to work." "I don't believe that." Lucy waved her hand hopelessly. "But does she really have cancer? Or is that just to make up a reason to get rid of Archie?" "Mom's sick." "Granny, is that the sort of thing you joke about? Jokes like that can get you in trouble." "Oh, whoa. Woe on all sides," sighed Lucy. "Maybe Veronica has metastasized into her head and doesn't know what she's doing." "No, Grandma." Julia frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Julia, why don't you take your father in? Your husband has a huge house, 2 floors, your father." "Grandma, is he a thing or an invalid or a sin of an old man to take him in? He's 42 years old, quite an independent man." "I can't do it, Grandma. Mickey's against it. I asked Mickey, and he said, 'What do I need your bum daddy for? He's got a job to do, and he's gonna be squeezing my couch.' Grandma, I'm pregnant. I'm gonna be dependent on Mickey, and I'm gonna put my dad on his back. He's got a big house, and he's rich because he works day and night, and he knows the value of his money, and he doesn't like bumps, so there's no way around it." "Well, no judgment," said Lucy, offended. "Maybe I'll find some woman for him. Men are in short supply nowadays. So I'll be a grandmother soon?" Lucy smiled. "Yes, Grandma. I didn't tell my mother that I was pregnant, and now I don't know whether to tell her or not. Maybe she'll be waiting and won't wait for the baby. I must say, you can't hide your belly, but it's not noticeable now. I want to tell you, granddaughter, if Veronica knows that she will soon have a grandson or granddaughter, maybe she will have such a desire to live that she will try to survive to see the baby and live longer. I'll go. Archie's waiting for me with news, and I have no news for him." "Wait, Grandma, get in the car. Let me take you home and then I'll go to my mom." "Take me home, granddaughter. Please take me home. I'm exhausted." After seeing her mother-in-law off, Veronica lay down to rest. She began to get tired quickly, which she had not noticed before. All the same disease, despite any external manifestations, lives in her and a little by little does its evil work. Veronica tried not to give in to panic, to keep herself in control, but when it is like this, as she is now lying down and not busy, then Mrs. Panic begins to impose her friendship. She wanted to live, but black thoughts crept into her head to end at once both life and illness, and not to live days filled with pain and expectation of death, not to torment her loved ones with her fading, and not to be tormented herself. The phone rang. Mom popped up on the phone screen. The phone rang, and Veronica gathered her strength not to cry and not to tell her mother about her illness before the time. She decided to tell her later, when it would be impossible to hide it any longer. Veronica heard her mother's voice. "Thank God, but I'm worried. You didn't answer my call, and I was afraid that something had happened. I'm so worried. I've been walking around all day." "Daughter, don't hide it. Tell me if you're okay." Veronica was ready to burst into tears, but she took a deep breath, coughed, expelling the lump in her throat, and said as cheerfully as possible, "We're fine, except that I've kicked Archie out to Lucy, and I'm divorcing him. But that, I think, is wonderful news." Well, Anna said, confusedly, "It's high time, but what is it, my daughter? Your voice is so... I can't explain it." "Are you sick, Veronica?" Veronica wanted to shout at the top of her voice, "Mom, I'm sick. I'm afraid." But she understood that you cannot do that. Mom is alone there, 300 kilometers away from Veronica, and hearing such news, it is not known how her heart will react. Although Veronica's mom is young, she is only 60 years old, but her heart is already racing. 20 and 20, that's the age difference between Veronica and her mom and Veronica and Julia. All 3 of them had early marriages and they often joked about it, saying it was hereditary. "No, Mommy, I'm not sick," Veronica answered. "I was tidying up the apartment. I was tired. I lay down and dozed off, and you called. That's the sound of sleep." "Well, thank God," said Anna. "Tomorrow is a big service in our church. I'll go pray for you, for your health. It's all the same. It's like I have a bad premonition. I get like that, but after I've been to church, it's like a stone falls from my soul." If it were as simple as Mom says, Veronica thought, I would pray day and night to live, and said to her mom, "Pray for us sinners, Mommy. Pray for me, dear," and tears rolled from Veronica's eyes. Mommy, there's something wrong with the connection. There's some crackling, I can't hear anything. Goodbye, Mommy." Veronica shouted into the phone, pressed disconnect, and burst into tears in her voice, spilling out the pain of her soul, despair, tension. She didn't hear Julia come in. "Mommy," shouted Julia, ran into the room, hugged Veronica, pressed her tightly to herself. "Mommy, come on. Calm down," stroked Veronica's back with her daughter. "Julia, I'm scared, my daughter." "Mommy, you have to believe in the best. Think about the good things, that the operation will be successful, that you will live a long time, and you just have to live to see your grandchildren, to walk with them in the park, to buy them toys, to be happy. Me, Mickey, and I are having a baby. I'm pregnant, Mom. My daughter, my little woman, my little girl," cried Veronica. "How frustrating to die when life is just beginning. Everything seems to be getting better in my life now, and you are happy with Mickey, and soon you will have a baby. My grandson or granddaughter, is it time for me to die? Julia, I haven't really lived. I thought I'd have time to get my life in order and live happily, but I haven't. I've gotten my life in order, but I'm running out of time. I'm sorry, my daughter, that I put my pain on your shoulders. I have no one to say it to. You're my daughter and you're my closest friend. Ma, I don't believe you're going to die. I just don't believe it. You should also believe that the operation will be successful and you will live a long time and be happy, because you said yourself that you have just started to live the life you want. I don't believe in miracles. I want to tell you, Julia, never put off what you want to do now. Later may not happen, and as I noticed, Veronica smiled bitterly, there is no time left for that later. Leska, Veronica said, suddenly lively and happy. I've had eclairs and Napoleons. I have already fed Lucy with these delicious things, and I suggest that you go to the kitchen and eat these pastry delights with me. When Mom talks to Julia like this, she doesn't seem sick at all. Mommy's mood swings are very understandable to Julia. Mom is both afraid and in a hurry to live, afraid that the disease will break her morale, and so she tries to laugh in the face of this terrible disease. I'd love to, Mom. You know how much I love these things, don't you? What about your figure? Julia said, and regretted that the words had come out of her mouth. What do I need my figure for now? Said Veronica, laughing. My figure is in no danger. When the cancer takes full root all over my body, it will start eating me and what I eat, and I will start to lose weight intensively. In the meantime, it's a feast for the world, and Veronica pulls sweets out of the fridge. That evening, Anthony called. Hi, Veronica, how are you? Hi, what do you mean? How am I? Anthony had never called her before, and she was a bit surprised. Well, yesterday, Anthony was quiet for a while and added to his silence. I thought you had something going on. Huh? You mean the kiss? Veronica said as indifferently as possible. I've had a drink. I've been wanting to kiss you for a long time, and now I'm on vacation, and I was hoping that you'd forget about it and we'd continue to work on Harry's behalf. Anthony didn't like Veronica's jokingly bravado tone. She never talked like that to anyone. Veronica, let's meet and talk. Right now you're talking and it's like it's not you. I feel like you need help, and if I can, maybe I can do something to help you. You were in the chief's office a long time yesterday. Maybe he had something to show you. So you tell me. I can stand up for the people of my department, especially for people like you. I can go to Solomon and stand up for you. Veronica wanted to shout, no one can help me now. But she did. On the contrary, Harry appreciated my many years of labor and added to my salary, of course at my request. But still, Anthony, I don't mind meeting you, but only to repeat our kiss. But don't save me. I would kiss you and kiss you and kiss you. You're a great kisser. I'll tell you, your wife's a lucky girl. Veronica, don't talk about your wife, and I can hear the pain in your joking tone. Maybe Archie's doing some tricks in there. No, Archie's not doing anything. I threw him out his mom's address. Are you worried? What's that? I'm happy, and I wish I'd done it sooner. Veronica, I'm coming over to see you. I want to see you and talk to you and make sure you're okay. Okay, come over and make out. Veronica was kidding, or was she? Anthony arrived with a bottle of cognac and various appetizers. Shall we party? Veronica asked jokingly. I think you need a drink to relax and tell me everything you have going on. What if I get drunk like yesterday and kiss you? Veronica flirted. I'll get over it somehow, Anthony joked. Veronica drank cognac with pleasure in the company of a handsome man she liked and tried to forget about her illness at least for a while. Anthony was also drinking cognac and trying to challenge Veronica to frankness. Hell no, I'll confess to you, Anthony said. Anthony, have you signed up to be a priest? I look at you and all I can think about is how to merge with you in a kiss, and you're giving me soul-saving speeches. Veronica sat on Anthony's lap and kissed him. Anthony couldn't stand such a passionate kiss and gave in to Veronica. Their kiss grew into wanting more, and they had everything a man and woman are made for. Veronica hadn't had intimacy with a man in a long time. Archie as a man for her, long ago deflated and on the side to go all the way to. And today, she gave herself to Valerka, or did she take Anthony? It's impossible to figure out now, and she wasn't going to figure it out. She received a caress she hadn't had in ages and her conscience was silent. Veronica knew that this intimacy with Anthony was the first and the last, and that it did not threaten the family life of Anthony Danilovich. Veronica would die, and Anthony would live happily ever after with his young wife. Don't sleep, Veronica, we're waking up. Veronica heard a voice that made her sick. Her eyelids were so heavy that she was unable to open her eyes. Veronica, open your eyes. We're awake, we have to wake up. She didn't want to open her eyes. She really wanted to sleep, and suddenly she heard her mother's voice from far away. Veronica, my daughter, wake up. Mom, said Veronica. She couldn't help but listen to her mom. She couldn't worry her, and no matter how hard it was for her to open her eyes, she opened them. Good girl, praised her anesthesiologist. It's time to wake up. The operation was successful. You just need to wake up and do not let me down. Mom, said Veronica, where's Mom? Mom's not here, it's just me and the nurse for now. I heard my mom calling me. It happens, said the anesthesiologist. It's the anesthesia playing tricks on you. Not only can you hear voices of people who aren't with you, but you can pick up odors that don't exist. It smells so strongly of coffee, such an aroma, Veronica said in a weak voice. This is what I was just talking about. This is an intensive care ward, and coffee odor is out of the question. In a few hours, you will be taken down to the general ward, and now rest, but do not sleep, smiled the anesthesiologist. I forbid you to sleep. Not only eyelids, but the whole body was heavy. There was a fog in her head, which did not let Veronica understand what was happening to her and why it was happening to her. Veronica did not feel pain. She felt tired and wanted to sleep. The doctor said to stay awake. She began to come to her senses and realize why she was here. Now, she wanted to fall asleep and never wake up, but she could not disobey her mother who called her and let the anesthesiologist say that it is a joke of anesthesia. But Veronica is sure that her mother feels her from hundreds of kilometers away, and she can hear her mother from the same hundreds of kilometers away. Breasts, her breasts, are they there or are they not? Veronica could feel her breasts. Rather, her breasts had been preserved, though it was impossible to tell under the bandage, especially with her first size, and the fact that Veronica could feel her breasts was something she had heard of. A person's leg is amputated and he feels it. They say it's called a phantom. The doctor said the surgery was a success. What's that? Successfully removed everything, and now it's just another therapy. Or is it successful that Veronica's breasts were preserved and it's not cancer? I wanted to believe in miracles, but Veronica is a realist, and all the tests before the operation and all the punctures confirmed this terrible disease. 6 hours later, Veronica was taken down to the general ward where Julia and Mickey were waiting. Mommy, how are you? Veronica didn't like her daughter's anxiety. Julia's pregnant and she shouldn't be worried. I'm at my best, Veronica said cheerfully. They said the operation was a success, but I don't know how successful it was. The surgeon who is taking you home has already left, and we will know everything only tomorrow. Veronica, I offer you a private room. I'll pay for it. My son-in-law offered. It's very comfortable. Are you okay? Will you accept my help? Thanks, Mickey. This is one of those times when I don't want to be alone with my thoughts. I'll be here with others like me. It's like we've got each other's backs. I'm in the same boat as them. Thanks, Mickey. Julia, I told you not to tell my mom about my illness. Mom, I'm not talking, and I'll stay quiet as long as I have to. What kind of question is that all of a sudden? Just a reminder. She's alone out there. I'm afraid for her. In the morning, when Veronica woke up, she heard, In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Amen. The woman lying at the window was praying, asking the higher powers for help. Do you think your God hears you? Veronica's neighbor, a woman, sarcastically said, he'd allow what is happening to us now. Your God won't help you and doctors won't help you. We'll all die. This disease doesn't spare anyone. If your God allows children to die of cancer, what to say about us, sinners? God is merciful, answered the praying woman, and to be heard, one must pray and ask him for his mercy. They have fooled their heads with God, and now, as they say, they trust in him. The evil woman did not stop. And here we are, believers and non-believers, we are all here, waiting for death. About death, it says the Lord gives, said the praying woman humbly. He has a lot of us sinners, and to be heard, you have to believe in the miracle of prayer and ask for help from the heart. Can you pray for me? Veronica asked, excuse me, what is your name? My name is Ariana. What's your name? I'm Veronica. I'm going to ask God for you, and I'm asking for everyone in the ward. I pray and ask. You don't have to ask for me, said Veronica's neighbor. I don't believe in this fairy tale. We'll die anyway. And for you, Cecilia, I ask that you believe in God, that if you leave this world, then with a light heart, with humility, without malice, and when you stand before God, receive his forgiveness and peace of mind. Cecilia hummed unhappily, but did not argue with Ariana any further. And you, Veronica, you can pray for yourself. Ariana turned to Veronica. No, I will certainly mention you in my prayers. I don't know any prayers, Veronica confessed. As soon as the rooster pecks in one place, they think of God, Cecilia said angrily. And you pray with your own words, not paying attention to Cecilia, continued Ariana. That's what you feel. That's what you say. The main thing is that these words were from a pure heart, from the soul. Clean heart, funny, said Cecilia. You first wash your hearts and souls from the dirt you have accumulated during your life, and then from a pure heart. For your pure hearts your God has given you this disease and me along with you. But what is God-fearing Ariana doing here with us? If she is pure and blameless? The Lord gives me a trial and I bear it. I do not grumble and ask him to soften this trial. Cecilia wanted to insert some other wicked remark, but Veronica stopped her. Cecilia, don't be so angry. People here are already on edge, and people leave faith, and I realize that only now. And otherwise how to live, how to survive. You still hope to survive. Cecilia smiled wryly. I hope, Veronica said sincerely, and you hope, if you decided to have the operation. What's hope without hope? And Cecilia suddenly cried, which no one expected her to do. I hope, she said. I don't know what or who, but I hope. I can't be the bedridden patient. There's no one to look after me and no money for nurses. I live with my alcoholic son. He takes all my money and drinks it all away. I must either get well or die at once. There's no other way. Good for you, Veronica. You have a decent daughter and a son-in-law who's not poor. You'll die like a human being. All 5 people in the ward fell silent. Each thought about his own, and just ready to strangle Cecilia for her filthy language, now pitied her. The surgeon who had been in charge of the ward and who had operated on Veronica came in. The operation was, I think, successful. The doctor said the breast was removed with skin grafting and the axillary lymph node was removed. Now we're going to use radio beams. This will help to stop the progression of the disease, improve your quality of life, and make your life fuller for a while. For how long? For how long? Even doctors can't predict that. A full life, what does he mean? No breast. Thinking that the outcome is one, it's inevitable, and Veronica's life is on the line? Is that a full life? Veronica realized that the surgeon here has seen everything, so he says it so calmly, so judiciously. What did she want? It's his job, he does it on his conscience, and emotions are not allowed to surgeons. Emotions are for therapists, or God. The therapist doesn't care about Veronica's illness either, he's just doing his job. But God? Veronica saw how serene Ariana was acting, so God was helping her, and Veronica decided to turn to God. Lord, hear me. I beg you, Lord, whispered Veronica. I beg you to heal me. I want to live, to enjoy life, to enjoy my grandchildren. Please forgive me for my sins. I'm ready to bear the trials. Just let me live. Amen. Anthony called Veronica several times a day, but she didn't care for him. What does he want? Thought Veronica. I told you I won't confess to him. His wife is at home, so talk to her. We made a mistake. We gave in to the attraction. But now what? I just want to get out of this. That's all I want. Anthony called Veronica several times a day, but she had no time to talk to him. But today she could answer, and she even wanted to answer. After all, it's not like she's going to make out with him or anything. Now Veronica is in sickness and in prayer, so she realizes that she sinned with a married man. Now it is excluded. She will not be tempted. And what temptation? She's in the hospital now. Hi Veronica, I finally got through to you, Anthony said with a reproachful tone of voice, and you didn't answer my calls? I'm your boss. What if I had a work-related question? Anthony was trying to be funny. I'm on vacation, Anthony, and I didn't want anything to remind me of work. I came by your house, but you wouldn't open the door. Do I disgust you that much? At another time, Veronica would have told him that he was so nice to her that she didn't recognize herself, and maybe she was even in love with him, but she replied, well, I'm on vacation and I don't have to be at home. I'm at my mom's in the country. Veronica lied. When you get there, let me know. Why? Because, Anthony said, because I want to see you. Why do you want to see me? Veronica was angry with both Anthony and herself for some reason. Anthony, because he reminded her of herself, and herself because she wanted to see him too. I don't know yet, but I'd like to see him. I'll come back to work after my vacation, and then you'll see enough of me to make you tired of looking at me. That's a joke, Anthony said. Veronica, you just don't disappear anywhere. Answer my calls. If I can't see you, at least don't deny me the pleasure of hearing you. Okay, I'll answer it. I don't think we can do anything on the phone that we've already done with you. Too bad we can't do it over the phone, Anthony said, and I'd like to do something with you. Screw you. And Veronica hummed up. Veronica, my daughter. Anna came into the room and rushed to hug Veronica. Mommy, Veronica cried. How are you here? Why? How did you know? My heart felt that something had happened, cried Anna. How come, my daughter? Why am I the last to know about everything? I didn't want to worry you before the time, Mom. Don't cry, Mom. Don't cry. I'll live a good quality life. The doctor said so. After the hospital, I'll come to you, stay with you. I have a long vacation, and then I'll go to work. Can you work? Anna asked. Not allowed, but necessary. My arms, legs, and brains are intact, smiled Veronica, and I don't need anything else for my work. Did Julia tell you I was sick? Veronica asked. No. Lucy called with claims that Andrew show was imposed on her. Said that you are sick, and if you do such twists and turns, then most likely metastasis has already damaged the brain. You don't value your husband, you threw him out, and that he might be useful to you when you go to bed. And Anna cried again. Mama, don't listen to her. I've never had any use for him anywhere. I've barely tolerated him, and that was for Julia's sake. That old gossip. I'm sick now, and I don't want to stand it, and I'm sick of feeding it. I'll never go to bed. I'll live. I'll live despite all my detractors. Veronica, my daughter, what do you say? Don't be so nervous. You mustn't be nervous. You mustn't live to spite someone. Live to please yourself and Julia and me, and remember we're always there for you and always ready to help you. And I'm not going home until you're discharged. We'll go together. Julia will drive us. I'll stay with Julia and Mickey until you're discharged. Mom, here are the keys to my apartment. You'll get tired of them. You stay with me, and I'll get better soon, Mom. I'm tough, smiled Veronica. I'm so glad you're with me now. That's it, Mommy. Go on. You'll be on your round soon. What an injustice, said Cecilia. A daughter should die before her mother. It's not right. Children should bury their parents, not the other way around. Everyone in the ward looked disapprovingly at Cecilia, and Veronica replied, and who says I'm going to die now? Or maybe I'll live and live. Things happen. Sometimes the disease recedes. These are such miracles. Only fools believe in such miracles, and such blessed as Arianka. Cecilia was angry. I didn't believe it either, but now I do, Veronica said firmly. I believe it, and that's it. I'll live. Despite Veronica's confidence, the disease reminded her of itself with nausea, and she ran to the bathroom, so much so that she vomited. Cecilia asked snidely when Veronica returned to the room, it's only the beginning. This thing that lives in us is alive, and if the doctors cannot cope with it, then only miracles and hope. I'm speaking here and everyone hates me for it, but I'm hoping for a miracle. I'm scared. What are you saying, Cecilia? Said Ariana. We understand that you're nervous. What kind of hatred? Why should we hate you? Hate is a sin. Save and keep us, Lord. During her rounds, Veronica complained to the doctor about nausea and dizziness. "What do you want?" replied the doctor. "Postoperative period, radiation therapy, plus stress. It's a load on the body. All this period runs differently, so you first of all need to calm down and be ready for different reactions of your body. After discharge, it is desirable to strengthen immunity fresh air, preferably countryside, but the sun exclude, and you need to use quality products, not from supermarkets and home. Then all these reactions will go away, and they will be observed and hope only for good. After discharge, I'll go to my mom in the village." "That's good. That's exactly what I was telling you. It was so nice at my mom's village. The air was so good that you couldn't breathe. It was quiet and you slept well, and there was nothing to say about the food that she and my mother bought from the villagers. Is it possible to compare them with those bought in the supermarket?" Veronica's appetite was excellent, and she was surprised at her own appetite. Veronica thought she would lose her appetite and sleep, but no. The doctor was right. The countryside was good for her. The nausea was bothering her, but she put up with it. The doctor said that the road to recovery was long, and she understood that. Veronica continued to pray and learned several prayers, and now the morning began with a prayer at the icon of the Holy Mother of God, and the day ended with a prayer. Her prayers calmed her and gave her hope for recovery. In the evenings, when the sun went behind the horizon, Veronica went out to the vegetable garden and slowly and with pleasure worked on the beds. "Daughter, don't?" Anna asked. "I'll do it myself. Take care of Veronica." "Mom, you can't imagine how pleasant it is for me to dig here. Even the buzzing of mosquitoes feels good. I feel alive. Look how beautiful the sunset is, Mom, and I never noticed it before. It's all so bright now, it makes me want to live, Mom." Veronica had to go to work in a week, but the nausea wouldn't go away. She came back from the village and had an unscheduled appointment with an oncologist. She wanted to find out the cause of the nausea as soon as possible. She paid for express tests, and the doctor told her, "Things are going pretty well. The test results are great, but it's too early to tell. It's been a while. I believe that you have nausea for another reason, and therefore I will appoint you a checkup with other specialists and in the district polyclinic where you live. Pregnancy 6-7 weeks, said the gynecologist, more precisely will show the ultrasound. Anything bothering you?" Veronica listened to the doctor, and it seemed that it was not her, but someone else. "Is she pregnant?" "It's happening now, and it's happening to her from one casual sex with Anthony. It can't be. It just can't. It's too much for her." I said, "There's something bothering you." The doctor brought her back to reality. "Nausea," Veronica said, confused. "I have cancer. I've had surgery. I've been receiving rays." "Now what?" "Now you need to take all the tests and decide for yourself what to do with your pregnancy. I'll give you my opinion and the medical opinion. In rare cases, women with cancer who have received radiation have sick babies. Sick babies are born to healthy parents, so it's up to you to decide whether or not to have a baby." Veronica got a pile of papers for all kinds of tests for pregnant women, came out of the doctor's office and sat down on the couch. Such news knocked the ground out from under her feet. She couldn't think, she couldn't go, and she had to go. Today she had an ultrasound in 2 hours and an appointment with the therapist. Good thing the clinic was close to her house. She got home and collapsed on her bed. Despite such overwhelming news, Veronica fell asleep. She wanted to sleep all the time now. "Here, look." Pointing to the screen of the ultrasound machine, the doctor said with a smile, "Here is your baby, very tiny. You can't even call it a baby. But there is life in this tiny dot. So far, so good. How do you feel about keeping the baby?" "I don't know," Veronica answered. "I have oncology." Of course, everyone has different situations in life, but if the child's father is on top, and it happens, a woman gives birth and the disease recedes, gives a chance to raise a child, and it happens that a woman becomes healthy as if she had no disease. Motherhood does wonders. I had my breast removed. I had radiation. It's nothing. A very small percentage of children are born with abnormalities after radiation therapy, and you'll be under our care and the oncologist's care. So have the baby. What if I die soon? I have cancer, Veronica repeated. Maybe the doctor didn't hear her. Women give birth when they are absolutely not allowed to give birth and risk their lives and still give birth, and it happens that the mother is healthy and the pregnancy goes normally, but something went wrong. Either way, the woman is taking a risk. The baby's father, the ultrasound doctor said. Veronica didn't even think about him now, but now she thinks. I wonder, if I tell him about the pregnancy, what will he say to me? Legally, I'm still Archie's wife, and there'll be no questions at work. The divorce is at the end of this week, and thank God, because when Archie finds out about the pregnancy, he'll start pushing me around. Although if he does, he'll be liable for child support. It's my baby, it's mine and nobody else's, and I decided to keep it. But I've got cancer, and I'm probably gonna die soon. Who's the baby for? Julia? Mom's out of the question. We'll have to tell Anthony Danilovich, the father, about the pregnancy. We have to get his opinion after all, the baby is his too. What will I tell my mom, Julia? If I give birth to a child at this age, and with such a terrible disease, that's for sure, they will consider it, as my mother-in-law says, as an outrage. The more Veronica thought about the child, the more she wanted to give birth to it, and abortion is a big sin, and she prayed, asking God and the Holy Mother of God for health. And suddenly abortion. In doubt, she called Ariana. Paula, I'm pregnant and I don't know what to do. I'll give birth and die and the child will be an orphan, and I'm afraid to think about abortion. Abortion is a sin, said Ariana. I'm afraid to even think about it. No. If I were pregnant, I wouldn't take the baby's life. If God decided to make you a mother, it's the right thing to do. It's a test. No, Veronica, and no more. Just have the baby. Ariana's words gave Veronica strength that she was on the right path. Her child must live, and then, as Ariana said, God willing. I won't tell my mom yet. It's too much for her right now. She hasn't quite gotten over the news of my illness. I'll tell her later, when it's impossible to hide it, but I'll tell the father. Everyone at work complimented Veronica, her new hairstyle, her fresher look, but of course it was a lie. But Veronica smiled and thanked everyone for the compliments. Hi, Veronica. Anthony approached her. I'm offended. Why did you answer the phone? My mom has a bad connection in the village, said Veronica, and thought to herself, and our connection with you has led to this. Are you all right? Anthony asked. I couldn't be better. Anthony, I need to talk to you, but not here, not at work. I'd love to come over after work. No, Veronica said, not at my house. Anthony, this is a serious conversation, and I don't want to joke around. When you find out, you won't be joking either. I'm not joking, I'm serious, smiled the satisfied Anthony. Why are you so happy? Veronica was angry. Satisfied to see you and that you're sending me up on a date. It's not a date, Anthony, it's more of a business meeting. We can talk business here, Anthony laughed, but this is a real date and I'm happy about it. That's enough, Veronica stopped Anthony's flurry. After work, but so that colleagues do not suspect anything, we leave separately and immediately meet on the next street in the Cafe Stork. Cafe Stork, how symbolic, Veronica thought. I like this game of spies, smiled Anthony, and leaning to Veronica's ear, whispered, Thank you, Stork. Thank you, Bird. It had to happen. That's enough, Veronica said sternly. This is getting out of line, and added snidely, I'll see how grateful you'll be to that stork when you find out. Anthony was waiting for Veronica at the cafe. He ordered champagne, fruit, chocolates, and coffee, which he sipped with pleasure while waiting for Veronica. How pleasant, after a hard day's work, to sit in a pleasant place, drink delicious coffee, and wait for a beautiful woman he liked. To top it all off, Anthony had ordered flowers and the tulips would be delivered any minute now. He knew that Veronica has a birthday in the spring, and she always gets tulips, and she always says they are her favorite flowers. And how could he not know that, working side by side for so many years? How did he never notice this woman before? And that kiss, the one at the driveway, made him see Veronica differently. Shit, and he's married. Stupidly married to that young woman. He was lucky to fall in love with her, to be so young. Veronica entered the cafe with a courier who was carrying yellow, sunny tulips. Somebody likes these delicate flowers as well as she does, Veronica thought and smiled to herself. A bouquet of tulips in the fall, it's a miracle. Veronica looked at the courier with the tulips and envied the woman who would now be pleased with this miracle. Such delicate smelling of spring, reminding that spring has come and everything around is reborn and nature is blooming in exuberant color. They remind life goes on and everything wakes up from winter hibernation and women become more beautiful and men more active and children more cheerful. Life is boiling, but not now. It's fall October, the year is running out, as well as Veronica's life. But when which lives in her now, will still live and rejoice in the spring. Tulips, and she at this moment decided to finally, no matter what, give life to the baby, who wants to live as she does. Veronica, Anthony called her and waved. Anthony's phone rang, he answered it, kissed Veronica on the cheek and said, "I'll be right there." Anthony was carrying Tulips with a smile halfway down his face. Turns out that's who they were meant for. So she was jealous of herself. "For you, Veronica," and Anthony handed her a bouquet. "I know you like tulips. I wanted to make you happy." Veronica took the flowers and brought them to her face, closed her eyes, breathed in the faint scent of spring and smiled. It had been a long time since she'd felt this good and this peaceful. She hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe because the tulips pushed her to the final decision to bear and give birth to a child. Or maybe it was because for the first time she had learned to enjoy life, to enjoy everything that was happening to her now, and to enjoy everything around her that she had never noticed before. This deadly disease had changed her herself and her life, and if it hadn't been fatal, Veronica would have thanked her. "Did I do well with the flowers?" Anthony kept smiling. "Not that word," Veronica said sadly. "I'm happy. Tulips in October, it's a miracle. How little is needed for happiness, and yet how much is needed for it." "Why so sad?" asked Anthony. "We should be happy while we are alive," said Anthony with Veronica's words that she said when she kissed him at the entrance. "Veronica, your words, 'while we are alive,' were so much in my heart that I could say they became my life motto. Let's drink champagne to seeing each other again, to you and me, to everything that's happening to us." If she and Anthony were truly close, she'd gladly drink to that. But as it was, no. "You don't even realize how close we are now," Veronica thought, and far apart at the same time. Veronica was afraid to tell Valerka about the baby, but today she would definitely talk about it. It was necessary to dot all the dots and, in spite of everything, to live on, to carry the child and try not to die longer. "I won't drink," Veronica said. Anthony raised his eyebrows in surprise. "You don't want champagne? Order something else?" "No need to order. I can't drink alcohol," Veronica replied. "You're still hiding something from me. I felt it even then, at the entrance of your house." "Veronica, are you sick?" "Yes, I'm sick, but that's not the main thing." "No, of course it's not." Veronica did not know how to say everything and not to be humiliated and crushed by Anthony, but she had to say it. "I'm worried. I don't know how to say it." Veronica nervously bit her lips, and her fingers trembled, and her voice with a hoarseness seemed to Veronica not hers. She didn't recognize her own voice, but still she gathered her strength and on an exhalation said, "I'm pregnant." The silence at the table was becoming unbearable. The noise of the cafe had a life of its own, but at Veronica and Anthony's table, there was a silence that swallowed up all extraneous sounds. Anthony froze with a glass in his hand and looked not at Veronica, but at the glass, as if he wanted to see something in it. "That's what I wanted to tell you." Veronica broke the silence, stood up and got ready to leave. "Wait," Anthony said in an orderly tone, stiff as a boss. "And why do I need to know?" "You're divorcing Archie, and you're pregnant by him, so what? So are you divorcing him, or are you not divorcing him now?" "I don't understand." "I'm divorcing Archie, but it's not Archie's baby." Veronica was going to say it's his, Anthony's, but Anthony beat her to the punch. "Pregnancy is a consequence of your vacation." Anthony was angry. "Do you really think I called you here to tell you about a vacation pregnancy? It's your baby, Anthony. From that one-time affair we had." Anthony was silent again. Now he wasn't looking at the glass he still held in his hand, but at Veronica. "My child?" Anthony interjected. "You mean?" "I've already said it. Yours is no one else's. After the baby's born, you can have it none tested. I won't consent to testing now. I don't want to risk it." "Waiter!" Anthony suddenly shouted. 200 grams of cognac, and immediately, "I can't get to the bar by myself." The waiter ran for the cognac, and Veronica waited for Anthony's verdict. Having drunk 200 grams of cognac in one go, Anthony took a breath and said, "Veronica, you may not believe me, but if it's true, I'm glad, very glad of it. You know that with Kathy, we couldn't have children, and I foolishly got involved with this Angela. I would have continued to live with Kathy, but Angelica told me she was pregnant with my child and even brought me a certificate. I was happy as a fool, and she told me that if I didn't marry her, she would have an abortion. So I divorced Kathy and married that worthless Angela, who then told me that she had a miscarriage and would not have a baby, and that she did not get pregnant. I already thought that I was not capable of having children, and then such news. Anthony sat down next to Veronica, hugged her and said, "Let's raise our child." "Veronica, I'm happy," smiled the drunken Anthony. "Maybe I'm not so overjoyed. I'm just a little shocked." "You're married, Anthony, and how do you explain to your wife that you have a baby? A baby is not a bill of goods you can hide from your wife." "What wife? Where do you see the wife? She and I have nothing in common. She's not ready to be a wife or a mother. She doesn't study, doesn't work, takes selfies and sits on her cell phone all day. It's not like I have anything to do with her. I have nothing to talk to her about. I'll divorce her without regret. I'd divorce her without you. But our child will speed it up." "Wait, Valera, what about love? Are you serious, Veronica? Can't you see I'm sailing all the way to you? Or do you want scarlet sails?" Anthony smiled. "If you want, I'll organize it. And you, Veronica, are you willing to put up with me? I'd be happy to put up with you, and it would all be fine if it weren't for my illness, which led me to everything that's happening now, to you, to the baby, to the breakup with Archie. Valera, I'm in a hurry to live. I've had such a bright, full life since I found out I was sick, but it's probably running out. I have cancer, Valera, and my vacation has been so long because I've had surgery and radiation." Anthony was quiet again for a few minutes, but he didn't let Veronica out of his arms. "So you may have to raise the baby on your own. Are you ready for that? Ready to recognize yourself as a father and raise the baby, maybe even with Angela? But the baby's gonna be born anyway, even if you give it up. Angela's out of the question. She's the one who needs to be raised, and it's not my fault. Let her parents take care of her upbringing, and I, if anything, will raise my child myself, and my mother and father will help. They've been raving about grandchildren for a long time. Veronica, tell me about your illness. Maybe not everything is not so terrible as you think, because many people are cured of it, live a long time and died of something else. I really hope for this miracle. I will soon be a grandmother," smiled sadly Veronica. "How you like the prospect of living with a grandmother?" "It's a great prospect. Veronica, I don't worry about it. I've known you for so many years and now I'm sure that you're my woman, 100% mine, and I don't want others. I've had enough of young wives. So what about the disease? I have breast cancer. I had my breast and lymph node in my armpit removed. I got radiation therapy, and now I have to keep watching. Won't it hurt the baby? There are risks, but they're minimal. As doctors tell me, there are risks even in healthy women, but I and our child are under the supervision of specialists. I somehow believe that you and I will be fine." Anthony almost shouted, "Veronica, I was not lucky with my family life, and neither were you. But it's gonna be okay now." In front of the city courthouse, Archie and Lucy were waiting for Veronica. "Hi, Veronica." "Wait," greeted Veronica, still her mother-in-law. Archie mumbled something to himself and stepped aside for a smoke. "We still have 20 minutes before the court hearing. I want to talk to you. Veronica, you realize you and Archie are going to be divorced and that's it." "That's what?" Veronica doesn't understand. "That's why we're here. You're at an age when men don't stand in line for you, especially when you're sick. Nobody needs sick people, and Archie won't betray you. He'll be by your side till the end." "I mean until the end. Who'll give you that proverbial glass of water when you're infirm? You can't divorce Archie." "Lucy, you have to understand, our marriage is obsolete and has been for a very long time. I only put up with Archie for Julia's sake, and now I can and won't put up with him anymore. I can get a glass of water from a nurse, so I'm not going to keep a whole hog around for a glass of water. How can you insult a man like that?" Lucy was indignant, "And Archie and I will not give our consent to the divorce, and the court will give a delay, and then the situation will change." "Well, first of all, you can't give or withhold consent to a divorce, and secondly, the situation won't change. I'm getting married to another man and we have a child together." The mother-in-law glared at Veronica, then squinted her eyes and laughed so that those who were near the courthouse looked back at her laughter. "You've recovered from your illness quickly, or is it gone and this is just a lie? Oh, Veronica, how could you get so screwed up? Poor Archie, what a monster he's been living with. Now, even if you want him back, you won't see him." The mother-in-law said proudly and went to her son. "Veronica, let's live together. Divorce is a matter of time." "No, Valera. Understand me. The child is conceived out of wedlock, and live with us when you are not divorced. I cannot afford it. What you want to think about me. But I pray, ask for mercy, and then I'll live with you in sin. I rely on God and on a miracle. I don't want to die. I really want to be near you. I really do. But I can't, Valera. I have to wait. And then I told you, I have no breasts. It's not easy for me. I'm afraid to scare you off. You're not gonna scare me off with that. Veronica, if it's important to you, you can get an implant, if it's possible. I've already consulted with an oncologist, but not now, Leia. I understand you, but you also understand me. Angela won't give me a divorce, and again, she invented pregnancy with a certificate. But believe me, Veronica, I'm sure there is no pregnancy there, and now I won't touch her. I want to be with you and our child. Only after we've consummated our marriage. With my pregnancy, you don't have to wait a month, you just have to divorce Angela. Or have you changed your mind? You tell me. I realize I'm not a full-fledged woman. Don't say that. You're carrying our child. That's what defines a complete woman, not what you think it is. I'm not giving up on you. Don't even think about it. Veronica did not know how to tell her mom and Julia, but as they say, the spoiled phone in the form of a former mother-in-law did not take long to wait, and she found out about everything in Veronica's mother and daughter. Mom, I know that Grandma can exaggerate and make up, but did she make up your pregnancy and that you are now a bride and are going to get married? Confused asked her daughter Veronica. Yes, Julia took her by surprise, and that's why there's no need for approaches and it's necessary to tell it like it is. She didn't make it up, answered Veronica. I am really pregnant and I'm going to get married. Why do I have to find out from Grandma instead of you? Mom, sometimes I think Grandma's right and you're in over your head. Do you realize you're seriously ill? And what would happen to the baby if? Don't give me that if. Veronica replied sharply, I'm fine in my head. Should I bury myself now? Lie down and wait for death? I want to live, I want to love, and I want to raise my child. Lesia, it hurts me that you're my daughter and you don't support me. I've only just started to live because of my illness. Do you understand? I'll live. Don't be nervous, Mom. I'm realistic about things. What if? And if I die, the child will be raised by his father. I won't hang it on you. Don't worry. Just let me live the life I want. Of course, if you made up your mind and you didn't even tell your grandmother and me. Julia, I'm a big girl and I don't need anyone's advice. In support, it is yes, every person needs, but in advice, alas, I wouldn't disappoint you. I do not need, and I will live at my own discretion. When have I ever imposed my advice on you if you didn't ask for it? Julia was silent, as if trying to remember whether her mother gave her advice. Lesia, let's not accuse each other of anything, but try to accept each other as we are. All right, Julia replied grudgingly, but from now on, let me know about your antics, so that I don't have to hear about them from third parties. Veronica realized from the conversation with her daughter that her mother was already aware of her twists and turns, as Julia put it, and decided to call her mother first and tell her about the latest events in her life. How did you decide to do it, my daughter? Anna asked, suddenly, and the child without a mother. Mom, it happens and healthy women suddenly die. Everything happens, but I now so appreciate life that I cannot deprive her of her child, whom I already love. And I love his father, and I love you, Mommy. Do you know how happy I am right now? I've never been happier. It's so nice to live in love. Even if it's my last days or months, I want to live and be happy, to see my baby grow, to see his first steps, to hear him say mommy to me. I want to live and try to live long. I can't leave love early. Well, if that's the way it is, then that's the way it is, my daughter, and I always support you. You know that, and don't hide anything from me, because Lucy said so many things that made my heart sick. Mom, you better not take her calls. You'll hear nothing but gossip from her. Mommy, it's Monday. Wake up. Woke up 3-year-old Naomi. Veronica stretched, smiled, and opened her eyes. And now, a concert for Mommy, Naomi said and sang, Happy March 8th, Happy Spring Holiday. With the first flowers on this day, finishing the song she shouted, Daddy, and now come in. Anthony came into the bedroom with a bunch of yellow tulips like sunshine. Happy holidays, sweetheart, Anthony said and kissed Veronica. I'm not friends with you, Mom. Love. Am I? Naomi frowned. You too, Naomi, my favorite. Anthony hugged his daughter. You are my most favorite girls. Yay, shouted Naomi and jumped on her mother and father's bed. Yay? My mom and I are my favorite.
But what have you got? Matt gazed greedily into his brother's hand. Nick was weaker in the counting, and so was still moving his lips over the coins. 33. Finally, he answered cheerfully. I got 52, Matt said. That adds up to 85. That's enough, Nick asked hopefully. I don't know, the older man shrugged. But when we were walking by yesterday, I looked at the window, and it said that in honor of the holiday discounts on bouquets. Nick, who always marveled at his brother's ingenuity, said excitedly. Outside the window of a small apartment in an old 5-story building, the sun was shining, and there was not a cloud in the sky. Such wonderful weather stood for a day, which, coupled with the abnormally high air temperature for March, led to the fact that as the time moved towards International Women's Day, there was almost no snow left on the streets of the city, and the vegetation even began to swell, greenish in buds. The weather. Nick and Matt sat in their room and counted the contents of their emptied piggy banks. It was customary for their little family's piggy banks to be filled once a week after Mom came home before the weekend, and usually had a little change from what she had left over after going into the store. Natalie just thought that pocket money was important for kids because it taught them the value of money, and besides, you can keep them busy with difficult choices. What should I spend it on? To buy gum today or tomorrow when they go for a walk in the park on Sunday? To eat ice cream or a hot donut with jelly? Now Matt and Nick were 8 and 7 years old, respectively, with first grade looming for the fall. As for the piggy banks, which were one for each brother, their current contents had accumulated for 3 whole months. Because the small family was quite tight with money. It was because Natalia had been fired from the bookstore where she had worked for a long time, and now she had to find a new job, of course, because her savings were melting away. So you have 2 children. As soon as at the interview, for example, in the supermarket for the vacancy, cashier sounded this phrase, with slight variations, but one meaning always, Natalie tensed, because it meant one thing in communication with a specialist from the Human Resources Department. She now walks on the edge, because no one liked the fact that the potential employee had difficult family circumstances, that the potential employee would take a sick leave, and 1,000 other reasons to go away. After all, Natalie, in principle not accustomed to lying, honestly said that yes, she has no husband, and no relatives do not help to raise children. They live on their own with their small family. So it turned out that the current situation of Natalie, Nick, and Matt as if hinted that soon someone would be completely poor. But Natalie tried to hold on and not descend into despair, but it wasn't easy. After all, she had to pay off debts on utility bills, and her brothers had pneumonia in winter, and the doctor prescribed a long course of expensive vitamins. And they grew up, naturally, like all kids, so they had to buy new clothes for spring. The family was orphaned, left without the main breadwinner defender, and most importantly, without a dear loved one. A little over a year ago, he was just going to work in the morning and stopped at an intersection to wait for a green light. And there was some rich kid coming back from a club at 7 o'clock in the morning. He was, as they found out later, drunk, had taken some nasty stuff at the club, and on the corner he lost control. The car flew into a bus stop. Everyone managed to bounce out of the way except Chris. The major, he died on the spot too. His family, by the way, didn't even bother to offer moral compensation. They were generally dismissive of other people's grief. We'll have to think of something. Matt sighed. Mom's so sad. We have to make her happy. He waved his hands. How about we sell something? Nick asked. No, we need everything ourselves. But I'll think of something, Matt said stubbornly. There was a rustling in the hallway. That's Mom walking in there. Let's clean it up, Matt told his brother. And they began to put the coins back in the cracks. On the backs of the porcelain sninkies, the piggy banks were modern, no need to break to get to the contents. There's a plastic flap at the bottom. You're not dressed yet, asked her mother, peering into the room. We need help. We quickly scooped up Matt. No, we don't. What are we, little? Natalie, nodding, shut the door back. But stop it, Matt told his brother, because Nick's lips quivered. He always cringed somehow when Mom dressed in all black and tied a black shawl on her head. That's how she looked at the funeral of her husband and the father of her children. That's how she looked every time they went to the cemetery once a month. It took a long time to get to that eternal last refuge. On 2 buses, streetcars, and shuttles across town. And no matter how little money there was in the family, Natalie always found a couple hundred for fresh flowers. She took great care to keep everything nice and clean and neat. We were the only ones left, Natalie said quietly and stroked her youngest son's head. "We are orphans." She always said something sad on the road. Nick roared at first. Then he got used to it and just sniffled tensely. Matt looked at his brother in a pathetic and patronizing way. He took him firmly by the paw when they got off at the last stop. In general, Matt began to think a lot about life for an 8-year-old. As he got off, thoughts came. He, figuratively speaking, looked at them from all sides, evaluated them, and figured out how they could be applied to real life or they would remain purely in his head. And lately, Matt had been particularly concerned with the future of his family. He wondered more and more if his mom would get married, because he knew it happens. And even some adults say it's necessary to have a man in the house. An example for the sons of a master. True, Matt did not share such views. Why do they need a hypothetical man in the house? Especially if he looks like Uncle Tom, a former colleague of Dad, who works in the same car service. He's been dropping by more and more lately. Sometimes he'd stay for lunch or dinner and compliment Natalie on what a great cook she was. A couple of times he brought his brother's toys, plastic cars, which are cheaper than a loaf of bread. You can buy at roadside stands. "Do you miss your father?" Uncle Tom liked to ask. Matt would hit him for it, because Nick would start crying. But Uncle Tom, it was like he was happy to see a child cry. And he'd get on his nerves and tell him a man shouldn't cry. They obviously lacked a serious upbringing. And so, apart from Uncle Tom, there were almost no guests in their house. Those grandparents who were mom and dad to Natalie were known to the brothers only from photos, died of a stroke one after another before they were born. And those grandparents who were mom and dad to Chris were alive, but didn't want to know their grandchildren because they were against the marriage from the beginning. Nick was lucky enough not to be foolishly naive about it. But Matt, from a casual conversation, realized that these people think badly of their mother. They think that their daddy is not their own, that Natalie turned them on somewhere on the side she walked. Matt was sick of hearing that, so he didn't need those grandparents, and he hadn't witnessed the scene when those people called, by the way. Natalie, after Chris died, and offered to do a genetic test for parentage. They made it a condition. They said that then they would help to raise the children financially. Natalie insulted refused to do so, and all contacts with relatives were cut off. When they visited the cemetery, the first few times Nick sobbed with his mother, but not just because he missed his dad very much too. He was scared. Matt wished he'd had time to hit that on. It was some distant relative who had scared his little brother at the funeral, saying that there were dead people everywhere sleeping. But if little kids mess around here, they'll come up, grab them and drag them underground with them. Mom, of course, calmed me down. Nneka said it never happens. But for how long were logical explanations enough for the nun, even though they were yearlings? Matt considered himself not just the older, but a much more seriously intelligent man and generally treated his brother patronizingly. Now he and Nick were standing quietly, and Mom was crying, sobbing bitterly and asking someone unseen. Why was she being treated like this? What had she done to deserve such grief? I'm hungry, Nick reported. Matt sighed. They weren't starving, but lately they had mostly potatoes, pasta, and bread on the table, and sometimes a little fruit in season. Mom also bought soups and chicken kits and canned goods. Then, of course, we ate at daycare. But Nick, who was a terrible delicacy, constantly complained about hunger. But it's good that only to him to his brother, and he didn't pester his mother. How could she bear it, poor thing? The brothers did not notice how a man suddenly approached them. In general, the cemetery was not very crowded that day. And here, as if from under the ground, this old woman, also all in black, grew up. She was so small and puny that she seemed to be carried away by the wind. She came up to them and stopped beside them. Natalie continued to sob. The brothers looked at their grandmother in bewilderment. "Chris's wife, then," she said, wishing with her lips. "Excuse me, who are you?" Natalie, finally noticing her, turned around, wiping her tears. "I say you, Chris's widow?" "Yes," nodded the woman. "And you are?" "Margaret, I'm his teacher." Natalie frowned. It was natural that there had been teachers in her husband's life, but she hadn't personally heard of any Margaret and couldn't recall the old woman at the funeral. "You go to him too?" "Yes," said Natalie, implying that the old woman had apparently come to this sad place for the same reason she had. "No, I go to my husband's, answered the grandmother, and I visit him. He was a good Chris Smart. I remember, first in my class. What did you teach? Geography and summer camp. Natalie gasped. She suddenly realized who she was looking at. Of course, her husband had told this story many times when he was 12 years old, when he went to summer camp and got lost in the woods and was severely stung by bees. And Margaret, for the summer moonlighting educator, not only competently rendered first aid, but while lying Chris in the infirmary, visited him every day cared for. His own parents did not come to the boy, referring to the great business, but as Chris told me, he suspected that they didn't really care. It wasn't like their son was left with an invalid, so there was no need to travel. Anyway, Chris remembered Margaret with great warmth, but as I recall now, Natalie, he had not seen her once since he returned from the camp. She had quit school and gone somewhere else. They barely kept in touch, and now, after all these years, she found him in real life. And it turns out she was too late. Nor did she see her former student while he was alive. In that case, the whole story was turning out to be very bitter. And so Natalie stood there at a loss as to what to say and how to say it. Here she should deal with her own thoughts and feelings, as they say, and not listen to another person. But I didn't want to be callous, indifferent, without feelings. Chris is gone, Margaret said. Gone, son? Natalie sighed. It became even heavier that here was an elderly man talking before her eyes. After all, Margaret calling Chris her son was absurd. He had a completely different mother. For a while, the two adults and the two children just stood silently by the bed, looking at the monument. In the distance, some birds were still hovering. The sun was shining clearly. "You are poor?" asked the old woman and looked closely. "No, we are fine," replied Natalie. She suddenly held out a fist to the old woman. "I'm sorry." Natalie even stepped back. "Not at all. Take it while it lasts." Granny was quick. She grabbed Natalie's hand and put something in her palm. Her fingers clenched in a bunch, and she bounced off to the side and, without saying goodbye, almost ran through the cemetery, somewhere in the direction of the gate. "Mom, what does she want?" Nick pulled Natalie's skirt. "I don't know," the widow muttered confusedly. And then she carefully dropped her hand, as if she feared that the strange old woman might have left something evil there. On her hand lay a silver pendant in the shape of the constellation of the Great Bear. Fine lacework stars connected by thin chains were studded with transparent stones, drops of cassock. It was a luxurious yet elegant beauty. "Mom, what is it?" Matt asked. "A piece of jewelry," Nick answered. "Mom, why did the old lady give it to you?" "I don't know," said Natalie confusedly. Once more he looked around, but the strange Margaret was nowhere to be seen. "Let's go," she said. She looked sadly at the monument on her husband's grave, and then, taking the children by the hands, she left the cemetery. When the family returned home, they were waiting for the usual hassle of preparing dinner, then still the laundry to unload, and also had to sort through the fall leaves that the boys had collected in the square near the house. They wanted to make a herbarium, and although Natalie was not to herbarium, she was in a heavy, dusty apathy for the last few days. But she could not refuse her sons. In the evening, when the boys had gone to bed, Natalie remembered the old woman and the pendant. She had the impression that the grandmother might not have her head on straight. Why would she give her former student's wife such a thing? Well, the morning is wiser, Natalie decided, and put the thing on the shelf of the secretary behind the model sailboat. Chris assembled it and the kids helped. Finally went to bed. Ordinarily, Natalie slept without words. In principle, something appeared to her in the night. But they were chaotic and confusing passages that had something to do with reality. For example, she could recalculate the change in the store in her sleep, because it seems that they counted the purchases incorrectly. Or she could take an interminably long time to climb the stairs because the elevator broke and wonder where her floor was. But on this night, Natalie dreamed something extraordinary. She was standing in the middle of an extreme snowfield. In the blue sky scattered myriads of stars, danced multicolored flashes, northern lights. And although Natalie was dressed in a pink summer sundress and was barefoot, she was not cold. She felt so good in her dream that the northern lights were singing, as if they were the sound of magical violins and flutes, whose melody penetrated her heart, sheltering her from all the worries of the world. In her dream, she distantly remembered that somewhere out there beyond the snowy, boundless desert, she still had children, but she suddenly became indifferent to it, that they were blind kittens who could not grow up without their mother, would live alone, and she was fine here. So good that she would probably stay here forever. Don't. Suddenly, a soft, velvety voice sounded behind her. Natalie turned around and gasped in amazement. Standing in front of her was a polar bear, a huge furry one with stray eyes. Don't, he repeated and shifted out of the plush, stepping closer to her. You have to be alive and you can't stay here. Something in Natalie's heart snapped and she felt a searing pain, but it wasn't bodily, it was her soul, the sorrow of losing her husband, the fear that she wouldn't be able to take care of her children. She felt sick, and she knew who was to blame. Suddenly, she held a trident like the one used to represent Poseidon, the god of the seas. Natalie shook it tightly and pointed the point at the bear. "Stay back," she exclaimed. "Is this all your fault?" "No," replied Mishka and fearlessly stepped closer. "It's the weather, and it's up to you to decide what to do next." Natalie frowned. What was he talking about? And then she realized, indeed, the weather had turned bad. Now she felt the cold and the northern lights were gone from the sky and the stars were out. And all around her a blizzard was blowing long and every tiny particle of snow cut painfully like glass. Tears flowed from Natalie's eyes and immediately began to freeze into ice on her face. "Leave me alone," she shouted to the bear and swung her trident at him. He stepped forward, she wounded him, but he seemed to have to go back anyway. As if he were a disobedient child, he exhorted her. "You can't stay here." Natalie shook her head desperately. No, she couldn't go back. There she would be overwhelmed again with worries, responsibilities, fears, pain, loss, fatigue. And here she would simply lie down and sleep, and let the snowstorm sing her lullaby forever. "No, I'm not leaving," said, as if the bear had read her thoughts, and stepped closer again. The trident fell out of Natalie's hands, and she weakly began to fall backwards, but did not fall. She was picked up by huge, soft paws. Warm, fluffy fur covered her with a blanket, and then Natalie woke up, jumped up sitting up on the bed and lingered. "Where's what?" "Ah, she's home. It was just a dream." "One can only dream such nonsense," sighed the woman. After breakfast, at which, naturally, the sons were again capricious, about the fact that the omelette is slippery and porridge with points. Natalie took them to the kindergarten. There, it was not without exchanging a few phrases with other moms and even one dad. In general, with all the people who brought the kids here. And although it was only March, they were only talking about the upcoming summer, when they had to take the kids out of town, and about the upcoming September. It was the first school year for many of the kids in Matt Nick's group. Coming out of kindergarten, Natalie was completely sad. Her crumbs, no summer vacation, neither on the sea, not in the camp, nor in the village, also does not shine. And that until September 1, it generally frightened her. It was necessary to buy textbooks, stationery, new clothes, and it all promised to come out in so much money. And also, probably, the school would start to collect money for teachers' holidays and excursions. Natalie was already thinking straight, how she and her little ones would be treated, considering they'd probably be the poorest in the class, maybe in the whole school. And of course, there was nothing to think about hiring her sons a tutor to help them prepare for first grade. Nothing. Natalie tried to cheer herself up. It used to be to school through the forest with wolves and one teacher for the whole village. And nothing. They grew up educated people. Further on in the schedule of the day, there were 2 interviews. At the first, Natalie barely voiced that she was a single mother. She was immediately told she wasn't hired. "But I put that on my resume," she protested. "You're wasting my time." Elsewhere, it was like everything was fine. And Natalie even allowed herself a little hope, fell down on some stupid test about zodiac signs, teacups, and pencils. Walking outside, she almost cried. Why can't a person just get a job normally? After all, she is neat, not confrontational, without bad habits, and even knows French. Really, what does the latter matter to a salesman? Still, it was very frustrating. The mood was somewhere below the level of the Mariana Trench, and even the sun was not happy. Natalie wandered slowly down the street. What to make for dinner? Cutlets. There was still ground beef left in the freezer. The main thing to add more bread and can still scroll vegetables. Apparently, only secretly can make her boys eat broccoli, beans, cauliflower, and all other healthy. Walking down the street, Natalie passed a jewelry store. There were a couple of saleswomen standing on the porch of this boutique, and a snippet of their conversation reached Natalie. Of course, he had his own progressive views, but this new interview format kicked out mockingly. One of them. And don't tell me, the other one supported her. Can you imagine? I was told already that I may not even try. Because, you see, not enough arrowfu. What stupid words. Anyway, he'll be looking for a sales girl for a long time. Yes, the first one laughed. Then he'll look for some professor's grandmother. Natalie slowed down a little. The jewelry store needs a salesman. She's a fool, though. She'd heard what they were saying. Apparently, the owner of this jewelry boutique is very serious about choosing candidates, and he certainly doesn't want a single mom. So enough of this nonsense. There's another place to try and get in. Roadside stands for candy bars and such. They needed a salesman, but they'd already scared me in advance that the schedule is variable and there may be night shifts. Natalie was crossing the road when she was thinking, and although she was usually a very attentive pedestrian, now she didn't notice how she ran the red light. "Woman, where are you standing?" She was belatedly called out by one of the people standing near the traffic light. There was a shrill squeal of brakes. Everything was decided in a matter of moments and centimeters. The hood of a red sports car literally jabbed into Natalie's legs, causing her to stagger and swing her arms ridiculously. Then she leaned on it to keep her balance, breathing heavily. The driver's door slammed shut. "You're crazy?" raged a young, blonde-haired man in a dark business suit. "What the hell are you doing?" "What am I doing?" Natalie, who was having a hard time thinking straight, said absent-mindedly. "I'm sorry." She whispered and swayed and stepped aside. Her head was buzzing. Dark flickers flashed before her eyes. A car hit. Her husband hit by a car. It had all been about the same. And now she was almost being victimized. Yes, it suddenly began to dawn on Natalie that if it hadn't been an accident, her children might have been orphans by now. Chris had died because another man had broken the rules of the road, and now she was out on the roadway by herself. The situations are similar and yet opposite. At this point, Natalie's nerves gave out and she burst into loud tears. She cried ugly, choking on her tears, barely catching air. She was barely aware of what was going on around her. Just reached the sidewalk and stood leaning against a pole. She almost hung on it, wrapping her arms around it. The driver of the red car quietly got behind the wheel and quickly drove smoothly to the curb, slowed down and got out again. He approached Natalie. "Woman, are you feeling ill?" "Of course I'm sick." Some lady in a beret answered him. "You hit her." "Why would you lie?" A man with a check bag on wheels stepped in. "No, I didn't. She ran the red light herself and wasn't hurt at all. She was just scared." Natalie, meanwhile, continued to flounder in her hysterics and couldn't stop. She could hear the stranger asking her what was wrong through a layer of absorbent cotton. She could hear him telling her to sit down. And then she went with him like a wind-up doll when he put his arm around her shoulders and led her to a place where she could actually sit down. There was a cafe a stone's throw away. A bus pulled up, with people waiting at the stop. A woman in a beret, a man with a bag and other witnesses of the incident began to climb into it. And beautifully said a middle-aged woman in a green coat, as in the TV series They Met by Chance, and he is a millionaire in a red car. Then the bus moved off. And everyone who witnessed this scene very quickly and forgot, because in fact, nothing tragic happened, and everyone had their own lives and concerns. "I'm sorry," Natalie muttered. She was sitting at the cafe table. She had already drunk a glass of water brought by the waitress, a girl, and now she was warming her cold hands and her lats. "I don't know what came over me." "Stop apologizing," said the blonde man sitting across from me. "It's not your fault, is it? It's just that everyone reacts differently to stress." "My husband died the same way," Natalie said, suddenly, and bit his lip. She wasn't used to complaining to strangers and didn't like it. But here the words seemed to come by themselves. She said a few more words, apologized again, and looked away from the coffee in just those few moments. As she looked out the window, the coffee house was enough for the man's face to change. It was like a shadow ran across it. but he immediately pulled himself together and looked calm and collected again, generally giving away nothing of his reaction to her words. Natalie assured him that she didn't need to go to the hospital because she'd only have a bruise on her knee. "Oh, I'm late," she exclaimed and fussed. "I have a job interview. Can I let you down?" he asked. "No, don't worry," waved Natalie away and fumbled embarrassedly in her purse. Still had to pay for his cup of coffee. "I'm paying decisively," he said, and before she would have collected the bills with change, attached a card dress of a new color to the True Waitress terminal. "This way I can let you down, at least somehow compensate for my fault. I should have been more careful on the road after all." Natalie hesitated. Should she take the job or not? She really wanted the job. The money was almost zero, so she nodded. It was a short drive of about 5 minutes, so she had time. The stranger introduced himself as Alex. She said her name, a few easy phrases. Natalie said she was looking for a sales job now, and she had a degree in economics. "Why not in the office then, or as a store manager?" Alex asked. "Yes, it just so happened," shrugged his shoulders. "I was already pregnant in my last year of study and decided that when I got out of maternity leave, I would look for a good place." And then Natalie told me what happened. In the store, near home work suited her more on the schedule and loyalty to the 7 urgent absences than in the company, to which was to drive another 5 stops. And then the second pregnancy happened, and when the youngest was born, she and her husband decided that, with his good salary, it would be enough for the family, and she could continue working as a salesman. It would be convenient. The schedule 2 after 2 and everything else. It was very satisfying. And now it turns out that again the salesman is the best option because, well, what kind of office career is she now? And it seems to me you with your experience and erudite could find a better place than in a kiosk at the bus stop, said Alex. "Oh, behind Katla eyes Natalie don't. You have no idea. But here too, if they take it, it'll be a miracle. You know," he said thoughtfully, "I'd just like to make a suggestion." "What?" Natalie was born in her purse, her ringtone playing. "It's just that I have a sales position open right now," Alex said. "The Queen's Diamond Jewelry Store." She'd heard of it. It was a very expensive and high-end place. She'd walked right past it the other day. "You're kidding." Natalie deflected the challenge. It was Tom, and he could definitely wait. And anyway, Natalie wasn't sure she was ready to talk to him right now. The man had come to visit her yesterday, as usual, but he'd been drunk. He'd made some stupid claims. And it got to the point where she pushed him out onto the landing, afraid of his anger. And even though he's probably sobered up by now, Natalie didn't want to talk to him. "Why not?" "Just kidding." Alex gave her an attentive look. "Where am I and where is the jewelry boutique?" Natalie waved her hands. "I have no experience with jewelry or with your customers in general." "What about them?" "With customers?" Alex asked with a smile. "You know," shrugged Natalie. "There, probably you need a special approach, knowing some etiquette and all that." "You are charming," Alex laughed. And Natalie bit her lip nervously. His laughter affected her strangely, sending clusters of goosebumps along her spine. Pleasant ones. Our clients are actually the most ordinary people. They just have money, and they're used to getting better from the product to the service itself. And yes, I can tell you exactly why I'm offering this to you. You, Natalie, not only have the proper education and experience, albeit in the marketplace and in simple places, but you have something equally valuable. He was silent for a while, obviously thinking about something, then continued. You have a literate, pleasant speech. You give the impression of an intelligent man. And I'm sorry, you are certainly not one of those women who in every client, no matter whether single or wearing a wedding ring, see a potential daddy. And pardon me for being blunt, you don't disgrace my establishment with your pathetic attempts at dating. Natalie was a little shocked because it was too good. It turns out she met the owner of the high-end jewelry salon himself. And after she herself, in fact, ran into his car, he did not scold her and drove away, but also gave her coffee, listened to her whining, and then offered her a ride and now offered to go to work for him. "I'll think about it," finally Natalie said, "but I just want it right away." "You want to warn me that you can expect anything from a single mom with 2 kids, he grinned. "Believe me, I can imagine how hard it is. I mean, my sister got divorced recently, and she's got 2 twin daughters in daycare, and she doesn't have time for anything." Natalie did. A pertinent but not polite remark that it's wrong to compare the problems and opportunities of a single mom who is the most ordinary woman and the one who is the sister of a millionaire. She only nodded and said she could send him a resume in that case. Alex said that the interview was, in fact, already underway, and added that if she wanted, she could go to work even tomorrow. "Thank you," Natalie said. "Stop right there, please. There's one more place I have to go." "A market stall." Alex raised his eyebrows. "Yes, I have a job interview at the stall," with dignity said Natalie. "First of all, I got here before I got here with you. And secondly, it's just nice to have a choice, you know?" "I do, and I find it worthy of respect," Alex answered seriously. "Wait," he called out when she got out of the car. "We haven't exchanged phone numbers, and then I can wait for you and take you home." "No, thank you. You've already done a lot." The woman smiled. "I still have to go to the store and pick up my sons from daycare. Goodbye, Alex." She waved him off. "See you later," he replied. And he gave her a thoughtful look. What bizarre turns fate sometimes makes. Alex thought, how did it happen that he met this woman, and under such particular circumstances it was so strange? But she seemed to him unique, extraordinary. As soon as he saw her frightened, confused near his car. And then, oh, why her? Why is this her story? Grim, bitter, cruel, and nightmarishly intertwined with his family's story. What's he supposed to do with all this? And the big question is how to tell her the truth or not. But then what would happen when she found out? Getting out quietly, Alex twisted the steering wheel and, having waited from the car the maximum speed allowed, rushed through the city. He had a lot more to do for today. The rest of the day, which pleased and calmed, was life-expanding. Natalie's nerves had passed quietly and without any miscellaneous such and such surprises. She'd even been lucky enough to buy fish at a discount. So it was fried fish for dinner, not cutlets. She dialed Tom herself and told him they should probably take a break from talking. He began to whine that he wouldn't drink anymore, that it was all so random, and Natalie sighed and forgave him. From the kindergarten together with her sons, she took the news that the holiday on March 8 will be a matinee and all the children will prepare gifts for their mothers. The teachers decided that the best thing to do would be crafts made of paper, flowers, something made of plasticine, and we could also draw pictures. Natalie made a note in her notebook where she wrote down everything about the family budget, to buy colored paper or watercolor paints. Both would be expensive, and it was quite evening before she remembered the jewelry that this strange old lady Margaret had passed on to her. Natalie twirled it around in her hands again. It was beautiful, and maybe, if not costume jewelry, even expensive. She decided, no, it must be returned, and what would do that? She dialed her mother-in-law's number for starters. "I'm not asking for money," hastily announced her intentions to Natalie so as not to be thrown from the other side of the phone. When asked if she knew anything about one of her son's teachers, the mother-in-law gave a predictable answer. No, because why would she even want to know? But then she sighed and said she remembered a certain Margaret. "Wait," said the mother-in-law, and leaving the phone on the line, went somewhere to the side. For half an hour, Natalie listened to the rustling. Then the mother-in-law said that apparently Chris sometimes wrote letters to this Margaret. She found her address in her son's old notebook and dictated it. "Thank you," Natalie said. She wouldn't call, wouldn't get in touch with her mother-in-law. But it so happened that after her husband's death, almost all of his belongings, toys, children's diaries, mother-in-law took for himself. And Natalie didn't mind. They were his parents after all. After reading the address, Natalie realized that Margaret didn't live very far away, so she could go to her tomorrow. Of course, it would be better to call first, but a phone was definitely impossible to get. The next day morning, Natalie found a message from Alex on her smartphone. Received. Smiling, she wrote back, "No, so I can send a resume." A minute later, he replied, "And I've accepted. When to wait?" "Tomorrow, if possible. What time should I come over?" Natalie asked. And he answered that by 9 he will be at the salon and personally familiarize her with all the specifics of the work. They talked details and signed the papers. At the right address, where Natalie went immediately after taking the children to kindergarten, there was a typical panel 9-story building. The yard in front of it was planted with poplars, which, judging by the thickness of the trunk, were at least 50 years old. There were flower beds under the windows of the first floors. And although it was too early for full blooming, in some places primroses were already sticking. And the whole picture suggested to Natasha that it could be incredibly beautiful here in summer. And on the bench at the entrance, where, according to the sign, the right apartment was located, sat the ubiquitous grandmothers. Natalie decided to address them. "Excuse me, could you tell me if Margaret lives here?" "Margaret, that's interesting." One of the old ladies looked at her. "She's been here about 100 years. Are you from Social Security?" Another grandmother asked, and before Natalie could answer, she splashed her hands. "It's about time, or they'll torture the poor woman to death." "Torture who?" asked Natalie. "Her daughter-in-law." A third old woman joined the conversation. "Her adopted son ran away from them. I mean that he goes to work on a shift, earns money, and drinks it all there, so he doesn't come home, and he doesn't care about his mother." The grandmother who had answered Natasha first added her own note to the general story, and then from what these old ladies were saying, the whole approximate picture of Margaret's difficult life became clear to Natalie. She had a late and unsuccessful marriage in her life, in which she was womanly ill and unable to give birth herself. She adopted a boy from an orphanage. Her husband at first supported the idea, but then changed his mind and ran away, so Margaret raised her son alone. Then the son got married and family relations finally went to pieces. Daughter-in-law did not put in anything mother-in-law and in general hated her presence. The situation, by the way, aggravated by the fact that Margaret began to have mental problems. She wasn't crazy, but sometimes she could go for a walk in the city and get lost. Sometimes she would start catching neighbors and passersby to talk to them about the distant past, to pour out her soul about the problems of her youth. All in all, it wasn't easy. "What's your business?" Finally, Natalie was asked. "My husband was once a student of Margaret's." She decided to answer as honestly as possible, but without details. "She and I met by chance in the cemetery at his grave. So I decided to visit her one day. They were good friends, I think. After he graduated from high school." Finally, Natalie stepped into the entryway, took the elevator to the 5th floor, and pressed the bell button with trepidation. If everything she'd been told about Margaret's sister-in-law Elizabeth was true, this meeting promised to be anything but pleasant. "What do you want?" A woman in a colored robe opened the door. "Hello, excuse me please." Natalie sucked in a little more air. That was a problem, by the way. Elizabeth reeked of onions and what didn't seem like fresh fish. Natalie tried to spell out in a cursory manner that she needed to see Margaret because she was her deceased husband's teacher. Met her at the cemetery. "And what?" Elizabeth interrupted her. "What do you want?" "Can I talk to her?" Natalie gave her a friendly smile. "It's private." Elizabeth glared at her. "You're not a crook, are you? You don't want the old one to sign the apartment over to you or sell her miracle pills." "What are you talking about?" Natalie was indignant. "All right, come on in." With a wave of her hand, Elizabeth stepped aside. The apartment smelled no better than it did on the landing, and even the air seemed to be humid. The bathroom reeked of tortured, not fresh laundry. Natalie was glad she'd skipped breakfast, just a cup of cocoa. "She's out of her mind," Elizabeth said angrily, "always running away from home. What am I supposed to do? Chase her all over town? It's high time to put her in an orphanage, and I don't need her. She's nothing to me." Natalie did not say that she, Elizabeth, and Margaret were nobody, and that she should respect her mother-in-law according to the unwritten moral laws, if only because she lived on her property. Those from downstairs, from the bench by the entranceway, enlightened Natasha. And about the fact that Elizabeth, she came from the village to the city and, in fact, had nothing. Until she married Margaret's son, and even now she didn't work. She lived on what her husband transferred from the north before he could drink it. She roars. "She's been sitting up all night," Elizabeth complained. "She's a hysterical old woman who sold her own trash, and now she's bawling." "What garbage?" "I don't know." Elizabeth poked me. "I don't go in her room and she's a pigsty. She's all over her stuff. She thinks I want to steal it and sell it. Ha! If only there was something to sell. She'd start running around the apartment like a friar and moaning that I've thrown something away. She throws things away. She just doesn't remember, stupid." so I can talk to Margaret," Natalie said insistently again, sensing that Elizabeth could complain for a long time. "Come in. Maybe then she'll calm down and stop whining." Elizabeth waved her hand, pointing to the door, and went into the bathroom. From there came the sound of a glint, something being wiped off by hand. Natalie sighed and knocked. "Margaret," she called out. "Excuse me, if I may." There was no answer. She waited a moment, then opened the door. She expected to see something even worse than she had already observed in this apartment, long in need of renovation. But to her surprise, the small room was relatively clean and even breathed easier. There was the usual empty old furniture, lace doily bedspreads, pudgy and prehistoric model TV. On another doily stood a radio, on the windowsill a few pots of flowers. On the walls, evoked from the Soviet-era posters about the teaching profession. And then there were books, as there were many of them here. Margaret sat on the neatly made bed and did not immediately pay attention to the guest. On the old woman's lap lay an open photo album. "Good afternoon," said Natalie cautiously, and stood still. "Do you mind if I come in? It's just, you see, you left the cemetery so abruptly, and I thought we needed to." Natalie struggled to find the right words and generally felt stupid. "You're the one who finally got the old woman's attention. But come on in now that you're here. Would you like some tea?" "No, thank you," Natalie replied. She belatedly realized that she had come empty-handed, not a cake for candy. However, the thought of drinking from dishes from the kitchen, which was clearly not Margaret's but Elizabeth's, made her nauseous. All in all, there was no time for tea. In the most delicate terms, Natalie tried to explain to Margaret that, of course, she was very grateful for the gesture, but she unfortunately did not understand why it was given to her. And secondly, she cannot simply accept such a gift. "Please take this as yours," she said, holding out the jewelry in the palm of her hand. The old woman looked at it as if she were ready to corn a poisonous spider. "This is yours now," she replied, just mysterious, and turned away, again focused on looking at the photo in the album. For a few minutes in the room hung silence, disturbed only by some retro song coming from the radio, singing the delights of conquering the taiga by young people. Natalie pondered whether to leave the jewelry on the dresser, but she thought it would be ugly and insulting. "Is that you?" she asked, nodding at one of the pictures. It showed a young woman with thick, dark hair pulled back into a bouffant style. She was pictured in the park with a bouquet of gladiolus in her hands, looking at the camera and smiling mischievously. Margaret nodded, which could be taken as an affirmative answer. Then suddenly Natalie spoke. Listening to her slender, quiet story, I dared not interrupt it. So much of this past event from the life of one ordinary teacher, believing in love, goodness, and happiness, rose colorfully before her eyes. And it was shocking in terms of the content of which was revealed in full by the end of the story. Margaret came to the city from a large village. She thought she would become a teacher and return there to teach the kids from the families she knew. But it turned out rather predictably. The city surrounded the head of a young girl, and when they began to tell her, say, "Such talented teachers, we need them ourselves," she decided to stay. And the pedagogical career did not go, but just flew uphill, as they say. And everything was good. Years later, Margaret became a respected teacher. She was held up as an example to many young teachers. And suddenly, out of the blue, love came into Margaret's life. That is, she thought it was love, but for him it was just entertainment, a savory treat on a business trip. And when he left her with a broken heart and a life born under that heart, Margaret was pregnant. And what a blow that was to her. She wasn't going to have children. She hadn't thought about it at all. And she was well into her 30s. What a sudden pregnancy. Some of the few people privy to her secret advised her to terminate the pregnancy. But there were also those who said it was a great crime against one's own soul. And then there could be bad consequences for one's health. But Margaret couldn't become a single mother either. After all, then her reputation as a teacher would be ruined, and she decided to go on a long vacation, ostensibly for family reasons, for a few months in a neighboring town. And then there she gave birth to a child and then abandoned it there. All erased the mistake from her life. That child, which Margaret renounced, was not yet a year old. How she met the man with whom she decided to try again to create a family. But before it turned out that he was not ready, Margaret learned her terrible for a woman diagnosis of infertility, and she considered this disease as a punishment for giving up her firstborn. But life, as they say, went on, and something had to be done about it. That's when she decided to adopt. And then the rest of Margaret's story was already known to Natalie. I sympathize. She squeezed the words out of her mouth. Natalie tried the situation on herself for a moment and was horrified. No, she couldn't do that. But Margaret was a different person. So how could she judge? I guess it's none of her business. Natalie was about to say she sympathized again, and then she was going to give the jewelry back. But Margaret spoke again. I couldn't love him the way I couldn't love my own. He was fed, clothed, and clothed. I never laid a hand on him in my life. But there was no warmth of soul that should be between a mother and a child. Because I looked at my Jack and realized that he was growing up. And there was another person growing up somewhere, the one who was dear to me. So I started looking for him. No one wanted to tell me where he had been taken. No one cared how my motherly heart was hurting. But I still searched for him, and after 10 years I found out the whole truth. My own son was adopted by people from the same town where I lived. From that, yes, I found him. Margaret paused briefly. It was hard to swallow, and she coughed. Natalie handed her a drink of water, a glass and decanter standing nearby on the nightstand. It was evident that the conversation was tiring the older woman, but Natalie did not interrupt her. It was almost an instinctive realization that Margaret was very important and needed to talk about everything and pour out, as they say, her soul, which apparently she hadn't been able to do for quite some time. Only I realized I couldn't ruin his life. I couldn't say, I'm your real mom. But I guess fate took pity on me, because that boy Margaret looked at Natasha very carefully. He came to my school to study, so I was able to see him grow up. I could watch him almost every day. It went on like that for a very long time. And then I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand it, and I went to his parents. I realized I had to talk to them about it. I wanted them to understand me, and maybe they would allow me to visit them sometimes, to see my boy more often. But they said no. They were angry with me. So it's scary to remember. Margaret had a drink, and they told her not to go near him again, that they transferred me to another school. And they thought I should be given more money, but they didn't have much money in cash back then. She nodded at the jewelry. Still in Natalie's hand, they gave me this. They said it was silver and diamonds, that it was antique and worth a lot of money. What do I care about money? I've lost my son. Margaret spoke very softly now, almost in a whisper. I realized it was time I stopped seeing him, that it only hurt my soul. That's how I retreated. And then when he grew up, did you ever think of meeting him and explaining everything? Natalie asked. No, Margaret shook her head. How would that be? Think about it. He's thought he was family all his life. No, I only sometimes. After the summer camp incident, he wrote me letters to congratulate me on holidays. It was enough for me to read letters from him a couple times a year or talk to him on the phone. After the camp incident, Natalie asked her question glumly. Until now, she had taken Margaret's story a little lightly. But now her last words were rapidly coming together. And what Natalie knew of this teacher of her husband's. No, she exhaled. It can't be Chris. And it is him. Margaret sighed. Chris, my darling, he died and I wasn't even there. I was there to see him off. I must have been a bad mother. Natalie jumped up and paced the room. It just didn't make sense. Could it be that her Chris had spent his whole life in ignorance of his origins, and yet he had regular, even if formal, contact with his birth mother? Was it possible that his in-laws and even her to his wife had not revealed this secret about his origins? And now what? It turned out that this old woman, she is, in fact, her own mother-in-law. And she's also Matt and Nick's own grandmother. You're confused, Natalie repeated. And take it away, she added, holding out the jewelry. I don't need it. And I'm sorry, but you're wrong. It can't be. Why not? Margaret asked. And that simple question made Natasha freeze. Why indeed? Is the fact that a child was given up for adoption and adopted and then no one told him the truth is such an incredible story? No, it's not. There's more to life than that. And Natalie understood that perfectly well, which made her feel even more confused. What was she to do with all this information? I took it, Margaret said, pointing her finger at the sparkling pendants so they would believe I wouldn't say anything to him, or they'd probably break up and move to another town. And I kept my word. And no matter how hard life got, I didn't sell that thing because I don't need it now. But Chris is gone. My little boy is gone. And you're his wife and my daughter-in-law, so take it. You're poor, I know. Sell it and you'll be able to raise my grandchildren. And if you don't believe me, Margaret added grimly to me, then ask your mother-in-law, Chris's adoptive mother, and show it to her and see what she'll tell you. Excuse me, said Natalie. I have to go. I'll be sure to think about everything. She walked, or rather jumped, out of the old lady's room and then out of the apartment. Stepping out of the entryway, she skipped impolitely. No reaction whatsoever to the question about how Margaret's visit had gone. The question had been asked by one of the grandmothers on the bench. No, Natasha needed to get as far away from this place as possible. Period. Yes, the day hadn't gone quite as she planned, precisely because she was absorbed in her own thoughts and worries. She didn't notice that her children were looking at each other puzzled, elbowing each other. And when their mothers turned away, they whispered. No, Natalie didn't care about any of that. She just made lunch, then dinner. Today, by the way, she picked up Nick and Matt from kindergarten much earlier in their group. One of the kids got the flu, due to which to attend kindergarten. Now it was not necessary about one quarantine for a week. And on this occasion, by the way, Natalie even experienced some relief. After all, now it was not necessary to clap supporters, because if the matinee was held, she would have to help her sons with the fakes. They were tasked with making a paper bouquet of tulips. However, not attending the kindergarten also created certain problems. After all, just tomorrow Natalie had to go to work, and the boys, of course, could not be left alone, but a solution was quickly found. May, a neighbor, agreed to look after the boys for a few hours a day, taking them to herself. May herself was also a mom, but her child in principle was not a daycare center. Not because he was sick, BT Doey, no, Archie was doing wonderfully well health-wise, but because of an unusually capricious degree of assiduity, a tendency to prank and disobedience. But he got on with Nick and Matt just fine, by the way. And even as May was surprised to recognize more than once in their society, Archie behaved much more well-mannered and positive in all senses. Entering the Queen's diamond jewelry boutique, Natalie was a little confused. It seemed to her that now she would be told from the doorstep that it was all a ridiculous mistake, and instead of her, they had already taken another 100 times more suitable applicant. But how had she been wrong? Alex met her at the doorstep and gave her a tour of the store. It turned out he knew a lot about jewelry. He was poring over the names of stones, talking about collections from leading jewelry houses. Natalie, by the way, looked at a couple of price tags and was simply shocked. No, of course, she understood that rich people bought such things, but to give so much money for some earrings with a couple of stones that would be enough to buy 2 large apartments in the center of the city. Natalie just couldn't imagine how much one had to earn to afford such a thing, and how one could spend money like that, when it seemed there were so many other important things in the world where they could be used, for example, to help orphans. Alex smoothly but resolutely introduced her to the specifics of the store, showed her the back rooms, bragged about the luxurious security system, digital technology, and finally introduced her to the plump curly brunette with a stern expression on her face. Meet Viola, our, so to speak, permanent leader and director of this branch of the jewelry chain. Natalie said hello and was startled. Surely this strict aunt of about 50 years old would smear her now. But she was wrong again. Viola turned out to be a friendly and patient person. She said that for the first 2 weeks, Natalie would be paired with her. This is a common practice for their store, a kind of mentoring, after which she will become an independent salesperson, a consultant. And then Natalie tapped her finger on a stack of books. Materials for self-education, so to speak. It is not necessary to learn by rote, but it is very desirable to familiarize yourself with them. Do you understand? Our customers want the seller can not only pull the goods from the showcase, but also able to present it beautifully. This means that it is important to be able to talk about the origin of stones, features, for example, types of clasps on the necklace. Anyway, you'll figure it out. I'll try my best, Natalie swallowed nervously. Yeah, she thought, I'm a fool. She laughed at her sons when they said they were afraid to go to first grade, because there would be so much science. Well, maybe she's scared about the same thing now. The first day of work went well. Natalie stood in front of Viola and watched her interact with the customers. A bald man in a white suit came in and picked out some ruby cufflinks. Here came a lady with a tiny syringe, which sat right in her bag, looking out of their funny face. The lady went through bracelets for a long time, complaining that she needed turquoise strictly from Afghanistan because it was better there. And finally, when Viola showed her what she wanted, she bought everything and left. There were other people. Natalie knew it was not good to count other people's money, but she was amazed how easy it was for people to make such large purchases. And then two people entered the store, a young couple. Here we go, Kat stretched out. Another saleswoman who had been looking at Natasha with a contemptuous sneer and envy from the start. It's the third time the beggars have come in. All they do is look and buy nothing. Natalie looked closely at the couple. The girl was late in her pregnancy and dressed like her companion. Very simply cheap, but clean and neat. There's your test. Viola smiled suddenly at her student and gave her a gentle nudge in their direction. Go on. Good afternoon. May I ask if I can be of any help to you? Natalie took a deep breath and spoke the way Viola had taught her. Hello. The girl smiled shyly in return. Would we like to see something with pearls? Yes, of course. Natalie began to sing about what a gorgeous collection of pearls they had, including black and a very rare gold one. But then she realized that these people wouldn't buy them, and the girl saw the price tags on the things Natalie was praising. But you know, I would advise you to pay attention to the products with river pearls. Suddenly decided to change the line of trying to make a sale Natalie, despite the fact that he is of farm origin. In terms of characteristics, it is not inferior to wild pearls. It was the kind of pearls that back in the 16th century were on par with fur and highly valued in Venice. And Natalie told some interesting facts. She showed closer earrings, beads, rings, and other items. Then the girl sighed. Probably this ring right here. And earrings, said the guy. His companion dropped her gaze. She was surprised at his generosity. Yes, he said, it's okay, Amy. We can afford it. Don't worry, David's still calling me over. I've got some more movers coming in. Kat's at the other end of the hall and poked her palm. Those poor customers were so hilarious. And when they left, Kat was the one who started discussing them with her co-workers. Gossiping girls asked Viola sternly as she approached them. Then she turned to Natasha. I can praise you, because Alex says that we always appreciate every customer, literally every customer, and for everyone we must be able to find the right products, even if it took all day. Kat and her celestial friends opened their mouths because the praise from Viola was no easier to wait for than a snowfall in the middle of July. In the afternoon, Alex stopped by the boutique again and offered to pick up Natalie for a ride home. She could have taken public transportation, of course, but unexpectedly she agreed. For what, by the way, she received another look full of dislike from Kat, who was, like some other saleswoman in this jewelry chain, a little unrequitedly in love with Alex. True, this crush was mostly based not on his human qualities, but on the fact that he was very rich and not bad looking. But how was the first day of work? Alex asked Natalie, and it was not a formality. He was really interested. She told him everything in detail. What is it? She asked perplexed when Alex, when they had already arrived at her house, suddenly took out a wad of bills from his wallet. An advance, he answered simply, and a bonus, he added, noticing how suspiciously Natalie looked at the money because it was a lot for an advance. I have an original approach, Alex said. Looking with the most honest eyes, I always give a bonus to employees at the beginning of work to motivate them. Thank you, said Natalie, and took the money. It was so unexpected, but it was also very convenient. Now she could pay off almost all of her rent and buy groceries and perhaps a new jacket for Matt. The sleeves were already up to her elbows. The first full shift was scheduled for tomorrow. Natalie said goodbye to Alex and even waved goodbye to him as she walked toward her driveway. Who was that? A hoarse, familiar voice sounded behind her. Natalie turned around, almost jumping up, and saw Tom. Hi, she said. Yeah, it's work. Work. Tom grinned and came closer. Why aren't the buses running? Tom. Natalie shrugged. She didn't like the feel of his hand on hers. But don't be silly. It's just interesting. So you don't have time to meet, But you have time to ride around with men. He's not a man, he's my employer. Natalie only now suddenly realized vividly what disgusting manners Nikolay had in terms of personal hygiene. Tom, I'm tired. Let's talk later. Okay. When later? He craned his neck. Then evasively replied Natalie, I'm busy. I have a new job. Where? At the jewelry store. Ah, stretched out Tom. He hummed again. That's clear, but see you later. I'll come by later, he added with a nudge, looking over his shoulder. I mean, we're serious. I mean, we're practically family. Your boys will be calling me Baya soon. No way in hell, Natalie thought. I don't want a father like you for my sons. But she didn't say it out loud. She went home. Her mood was a little ruined, and that inner nervous tension that makes you dizzy and tight in your chest had returned. Because Natalie realized that perhaps it was time to end this relationship with Nicholas, because he may not be a bad man in general, but she definitely and absolutely does not see him as a man with whom she would like to create a family. And what kind of man should he be? Natalie pondered, going up to her floor and calling her neighbor to pick up her children from her. Perhaps, she decided, he must be like Alex. Not in the sense of wealth, and that wasn't the most important thing in a life partner, but in the sense of charm and generosity and something else. Yes, she didn't know Alex very well, but she thought he was a good man. The next days, Natalie went to work with ease and a smile. It all turned out to be very interesting, and she learned to ignore Kat's slanted glances, especially since Viola had talked to her quietly about something. And there was no open hostility. Little by little, Natalie was getting to grips with the new world of luxury jewelry. She was beginning to understand them. And though this world still seemed completely foreign to her, she also began to realize that gemstones were beautiful, wondrous creations of nature, in and of themselves, regardless of how much people valued them. Not every day, but Alex gave Natalie a ride home, and one day he invited her to stop by a cafe on the way. The weather was chilly gray, and he said, why not brighten up this gloomy spring with a cup of hot chocolate? Natalie agreed. After all, it's not a date, she thought. What kind of date could they have? People from different worlds? No, of course it's not a date. It's just that Alex is such a person. He seems to make new acquaintances easily. He's open and outgoing. And what was Natalie's surprise when Alex suddenly took her hand that day and gently, affectionately squeezed her fingers. Now that contained some sort of romantic innuendo. She had looked at him then surprised, almost frightened, and he had said in his usual easy manner that he liked her very much. Or do you have someone else? He asked. No, Natalie answered, and then she gave herself a mental smack. She hadn't broken up with Tom as she should have, but had been avoiding him. But what she'd said couldn't be undone. And then, anyway, Natasha received a large basket of flowers at her home address on the next weekend, complete with exotic fruit and a couple of black and brown teddy bears. Alex apologized that they wouldn't be able to see each other as agreed because he had urgent business to attend to. He also added that flowers for her, toys for her sons, and fruit for everyone. The call from May caught Natalie off guard. She was just about to take advantage of her day off to stop by a store that was having a sale on home textiles to pick out new dinosaur bedding sets for her sons. And suddenly the neighbor called and in a voice shaking, scared and changing, reported that today, as usual, she took Archie for a walk in the yard. And also with them went the children Natalie had left in her care. And then, well, Nick and Matt got lost. They slipped away? Marina had to turn her back for a minute. Don't worry, May asked gently. They probably decided to walk to the store for some caramels. Or to the neighbor's yard. I'm looking for them now. I just thought I'd tell you to maybe come back and look for them too. Natalie didn't remember how she'd gotten back. She was in shock, horror, panic. Her mind was painting 1,000 pictures of what had happened to her babies. And it was one worse than the other. No, we certainly don't have anything for that kind of money. The woman replied sternly and harshly, even rudely. A saleswoman in a flower shop. Where the boys, a big secret from everyone in the world, escaped to buy a bouquet of flowers for their mother on the eve of March 8. Not at all. Nick stretched out pitifully, and his lips trembled. Oh, come on, Lois. Pushed the saleswoman in the side of her collie. Look how cute they are. They've saved up and want to please their mother. You don't want to bother with them. I rolled my eyes and poked Jim. Guys, let me show you something. Amy leaned over and looked into the eyes of both brothers. They were marvelously charming, direct, good-natured boys. Amy herself was about to have her firstborn. According to the ultrasound, it was a boy. She was amazed by these boys who showed up at the flower stall to buy flowers. True, the money they had on them was just enough for nothing. 3 carnations from the vase of merchandise at most. Amy sighed and wondered if they should add some money from their personal funds. Then they could perhaps buy a few roses. Look how pretty it is. Nick enthusiastically told Matt and showed his hand a floral arrangement of sky blue and snow white flowers placed in a box, tied with a pink ribbon. Auntie, how much is this? Matt asked. Jim rolled her eyes. As much as you can. Boys, where's your mom? Amy asked. Why are you guys here alone? Why are you here alone? Jim added sternly. What about us? Matt was suddenly afraid that they would be captured. So how are there no adults around? Generally sent to the orphanage. Mom in the store began to lie he on the move, and we just so dropped by. Nick, let's go. He pulled his little brother by the sleeve, and together they ran out into the street, and they ran sideways. Whew. Matt ran his hand over his forehead. We're in trouble. What are we going to do now? Nick asked pitifully. Matt, Nick, are you doing something? A familiar voice suddenly sounded. Alex had visited Natalie's house once in the past weeks and had met her sons. And now driving down the street, he suddenly noticed the boys. But Natalie was not with them for some reason. The brothers looked at him when he got out of the car. What about us? And Mom was at the store, Nick said, and immediately blushed to his ears. He couldn't lie at all. We're on our way home now. Matt put in a word. It's all right. You're not very good liars. You know that, don't you? Alex smiled and stood up, blocking the way. What's up with you guys? The brothers looked at each other again. Suddenly, they started talking in chorus about how bad it is, that Mom is sad, that Dad used to give her flowers on March 8th, and they wanted to give them. But not enough money. The kids also blabbed that they ran away from the neighbor who was entrusted to look after them. It's all clear with you. Alex shook his head. Yes, it's May. She's probably going crazy in there. Maybe your mom's already been disturbed. Okay, no tears. Okay. Hurriedly, he turned to them and especially to Nick, who was already squinting, began. Let me take you home. But first, give us that bouquet over there, said Nick. When together with his brother and Alex entered the kiosk. What a day. Lois rolled her eyes. There's catching stray dogs. What about these kids? She muttered under her breath and then said louder. I already told you. For your pennies here cannot buy anything. Give us, please, this bouquet, said Alex, pulling out his wallet. Jim looked at him skeptically at first, but immediately softened. She knew how to recognize wealthy clients. And so she immediately scattered in all sorts of nice words, took out a bouquet and handed it to the client. Are these your children? She decided to keep the conversation going. Alex had no time to answer. It was done for him by Nick, who, like his brother, was very afraid that something bad was waiting for them for walking alone without their mom. It's our dad, he said, and grabbed Alex's hand tighter. Finally, they walked out of the flower shop. Matt said he wanted to carry the flowers himself, so Alex gave them to him. Then he put the brothers in the car and headed toward Natalie's house. On the way, he thought about the strange feeling that had arisen in his heart when the boy had called him father. It was something exciting, a little frightening, but mostly a pinching, beautiful feeling. Alex was definitely lucky for chance encounters today, because as he pulled up in front of Natalie's house, he saw her. She was running through the yard, shouting her sons' names loudly. Mom, yelled Matt and skipped toward her. Nick ran with him. Alex also went in the same direction, not forgetting to grab the bouquet. My darlings. Natalie caught her sons in her arms and now crying from the experience of anxiety and joy showered with tender words. Alex told her what had happened. Why? Natalie grabbed Matt, the main instigator of what had happened. Shook him up a little. I almost lost my mind. Don't ever do that again. Natalie, it ended well. Well, don't. Alex interceded for the little adventurer. Look at the beautiful bouquet they chose for you. Bouquet, ein. She first paid attention to the flowers, aghast. So beautiful was the composition of the gifts of Flora. Natalie opened her mouth. She wanted to ask where the money had come from, but she guessed right away. You shouldn't have, she said. Shy, wasn't it? Actually, I was going to wish you a happy March 8th anyway, Alex shrugged. So you can consider it a bouquet from all three of us. He wanted to say that on the occasion of the holiday, why don't they all go to a cafe? And Natalie realized at that moment that she really liked Alex in a romantic way. And Nick and Matt realized that they also liked him as a family friend, that he was 1,000 times better than Uncle Tom, and they didn't mind him visiting them. But then a new face appeared near them. Alex. He was called out by a young woman in an elegant pantsuit. Shock magazine, I made an appointment for you, but you ignored me. Alex's face changed. Through Natalie a curt, I'm sorry, I'll be right back, and grabbed the press representative under the elbow, literally dragging her aside. This wasn't just any reporter. Alex had once had an affair with her and they parted ugly. And since then, this person seemed determined to spread all the ridiculous rumors about him that she could gather or even make up. Alex had already threatened more than once that he would get the lowbrow magazine closed down. And now I wish I'd taken care of it. We have nothing to talk about, he said dryly. I've already explained to you that we're done. And stop getting personal. Aha, that's what you mean, the journalist threw off her chin and flashed her eyes dangerously. You have an icy heart. We just didn't see eye to eye, and it wouldn't have worked out. For what must be the 1,000th time, Alex repeated. I hate you, whispered the journalist. It's mutual. He grinned back. So you're with her now. It's none of your business. Yes, it is. I forgot. We broke up. The reporter snorted. Oh, she knows. Ah, her eyes were shining now, like a hungry tiger that had smelled its prey. She doesn't know. Yes, it's none of your business. And it's none of your business, Alex said. But it was too late. Hey, journalist, Natalie waved her hands. Do you know that Alex is Sam's cousin, who killed your husband? It seemed to Natalie that heaven and earth had changed places, that the surrounding reality had run out of air and that she was falling into the abyss. No, it couldn't be true. But something told her it wasn't a lie. She looked at Alex shocked, disbelieving. What are you like? He said to his ex-girlfriend and paid no further attention to her. Walked over to Natalie. Look, I can explain everything. You don't have to. Natalie put her hands out in front of her. Don't, stay away, please. She squeezed her eyes shut. Spots of fire danced beneath the branches. How lucky were the boys, the sons, not to hear that. 5 minutes earlier, May had shown up and taken them home. That is, to her house for now, promising to feed them soup along with her Archie. Alex obeyed and stopped. He saw the hurt, disappointment, and something much deeper and darker than the usual resentment splashed in Natalie's eyes. He saw in those eyes that he didn't stand a chance. Should I leave? Quietly, he asked. She didn't answer, just nodded. And then she turned away and walked toward the entrance, and how Alex wanted to rush after her, to turn her to him, to make her look him in the eye and explain everything, to make her believe the truth that changed everything, that explained everything. But he realized that trying to do such a thing would make things worse. Perhaps she needed time. Or did everything now appear to be destroyed forever? He didn't know that, but all he knew was that right now he had to leave. It was weird to the point of being creepy. But the rest of the day was normal for Natalie, in the sense that she didn't give anything away to her sons. They dismantled the bouquet together and moved it to the biggest vase they could find. And then they watched cartoons together. And just after putting their little ones to bed, Natalie let herself cry. She couldn't figure out how he could lie to her and how it had even happened and what was it. He knew she couldn't help but know, didn't he? I mean, she had told him everything about herself back then. So what had he done? Why him? The next morning, Natalie didn't go to the Queen's Diamond Boutique because she absolutely did not want a job from a man who was from that very same family. Anyway, Natalie couldn't even think about Alex now. She wasn't surprised when she woke up the next morning with a headache and a sickening feeling as if the blows of fate weren't over for her and something bad was about to happen. After all, decided Natalie, good in life, surely there must be some black streaks to go along with it, right? And who could guarantee that the next black streak for her little family wouldn't drag on for 100 years? The call from an unknown number rang when Natalie sat down to mend the denim jacket Matt had torn during the yard games, and she was on pins and needles. Because on top of everything else, Nick had spiked a fever during the night. Nick was always sick like that. First, he'd get sick, feverish and sick, and then literally in less than 24 hours. He was on the mend in no time, so he was reacting to colds. And yesterday, while on his crazy adventures with his brother, he'd been running around town. Natalie was sure her son had a cold. Probably some kind of spam, Natalie thought, but something compelled her to answer. Yes, she asked absent-mindedly. Who's calling and what's it about? She didn't understand because the voice on the other end, which belonged to an older woman, sounded very anxious and its owner was confused. But at last they explained themselves. It turned out to be a call from one of the vigilant neighbors of the pensioners, with whom Natalie had already made a brief acquaintance when she visited Margaret. And it turned out that Elizabeth had carried out her threat and gotten rid of Margaret. The caller introduced herself as Joan and explained that Margaret herself had given her Natalie's number not long ago. Did the poor girl sense that something bad might happen to her and begged her to send word to the only person who could possibly care about her? Natalie was shocked by what she heard. But what can I do to help? She asked. What had happened in the first place? Terrible. Joan blurted out a secret story. It turned out that Margaret had had a heart attack not long ago and had been called to an ambulance, and Elizabeth, after a while, taking advantage of Margaret's weak, sickly condition, forced her by trickery, blackmail, and deceit to give her part of the apartment that belonged to Margaret. She promised that everything would be fine and that this would only make it easier for her to receive her inheritance in the future. And then Elizabeth decided that since she was the boss of the place, she could get rid of the old woman altogether. She lied to Margaret that she was taking her to a sanatorium and drove her to an empty cottage community and left her there, saying that it would be better for Margaret to live there now, rather than get in the way in the apartment. Oh, sighed Natalie. What's to be done now then? Obviously you have to take her away, Joan blurted out. Anyway, Margaret said you're her friend. And then Faith dictated which cottage community Margaret had been taken to, where and how to find her there. Thanking her for the news, Natalie ended the call. Really, what was there to do? No, she didn't doubt in the slightest that Margaret had to be bailed out, nor did she shrug off the reality of the whole affair. After all, it was well known how helpless and naive old people could be, but she just couldn't imagine how to deal with it. And here I feel like the most intrusive, most insufferable person in the world. Natalie went to her neighbor again to ask her to watch the boys some more, plus give Nick his antipyretics and other needed medications on time as scheduled. A quarter of an hour later, Natalie was already out of the driveway and racing to the bus stop. Natalie, a familiar voice called out to her. She turned around, rolled her eyes. Tom was the only thing missing right now. We need to talk, he said, slouching, walking toward her, his gait unsteady, his face swollen. Clearly, he'd been drinking. How long are you going to run away from me? He asked. Angry. What are you doing? We're family. Tom sighed to Natalie. I don't have time. And we're not family. Ah stretched it and crooked grin. How did you need that before, Tom? To feed your puppies. And now you're tangling with a millionaire. You think he wants your puppies, and he doesn't care about you at all. He shut his mouth and apologized, and then he left. Just as Alex appeared so unexpectedly close by, did he materialize out of thin air? But no, Natalie realized. He just walked up, and she'd been so preoccupied with worry that she hadn't noticed his car was nearby. Yeah, you went, Tom, to Alex, but he took him by the scruff of the neck. The men locked eyes. Get out of here, for the last time. Alex said, believe me, you don't want to mess with me. Back off, you psycho. Tom recoiled, deliberately squeamish from the other man's touch. He gave Natalie a contemptuous look and spat under his feet. Oh, come on, you crazy chicken. It's human to her. Tom drunkenly staggered off into the backyards. I know you can tell me, Alex said, that you don't want to see me and know that I'm a monster and a liar. But I'm betting you, just let me tell Natalie. And Alex spoke up. He admitted that yes, he knew who she was from the beginning, because he did belong to that family. However, that was exactly what kinship was. And in fact, Alex had hardly interacted with those people and had never lived with them together ever, but he knew about that history. And when he met Natalie and found out who she was, he just couldn't admit it. Why not? Because he realized that she would have been prejudiced against him, to say the least. And it was important to him very much, because from the very beginning he began to feel sympathy for her. He was afraid that she would start treating him based on the fact that one of his relatives had done it. And that's basically stupid, because Alex hadn't spoken to this cousin in years. And they were completely different people in general. But then I realized that one day you're going to find out anyway. Sad, he finished. I know I should have told you myself, but I kept procrastinating. I thought I'd let a little more time pass. And then he spread his hands. How did it end? It was very strange to Natalie. She never imagined that a conversation could make such a difference. But right now, she no longer felt the resentments of anger and almost hatred that burned her from the inside out. Just yesterday, she had suddenly realized that Alex, yes, he was a completely different person. He didn't owe it to the mere power of his ancestry to be like his cousin. And yes, Natalie believed his every word. And it wasn't even just faith, but some deep, almost instinctual conviction that he wasn't deceiving her. That he was exactly the kind of man he had seemed to her in all the past days of their acquaintance. But all of that Natalie didn't say now. She only nodded, and they met gazes. And though it didn't seem like it was enough, but right now it was more than enough for Alex. And then Natalie said that she couldn't stay any longer, unfortunately, because she had something urgent to do. What was it? Alex asked. And she answered him. I'll drive you, he said. And Natalie got into his car, and as they drove to the cottage community, she told him everything. Margaret? Alex exclaimed. But I know her. She used to teach at school, at a private grammar school, where I studied for a short time. Then she was said to have gone away. I think she and her husband were trying to settle in another city. I remember her. She was, he smiled sadly, a wonderful teacher. She gave all of herself to her students. Everything turned out to be exactly as Natalie had fearfully assumed. The dacha community was now in some disrepair. It was a little early for gardening after all. Margaret found herself in a cottage so dilapidated that it looked as if it might collapse in a gust of wind. The poor old woman was freezing. Her sister-in-law hadn't even bothered to give her warm clothes, and she didn't seem to be thinking straight. But then she suddenly called Natalie by name and literally clung to her, as if she could otherwise be lost in the big world around her. Alex said that Nana needed to be seen by the doctors. She was obviously suffering from hypothermia, and she was psychologically traumatized from the eviction. Alex took Margaret to one of the best private clinics in the city, where she was accepted as the most expensive client thanks to his money. And then Alex said in his usual decisive manner that he would arrange everything. Rent an apartment for Margaret, hire a good caregiver, and also, if she wanted, help her to deal with the fact that she would put in place a snooty daughter-in-law. But Margaret didn't want to. She forgave Elizabeth and she forgave her son too. She could no longer trust them to be her own people. I am alone with everything in the world, quietly cried the old woman. She was sitting in a single room. No, said Natalie, and approaching her bedside, gently took her hand. You are not alone, you have me. The words came hard to her, but she knew she was doing the right thing. Your daughter-in-law and your grandchildren. Truth. Margaret's hopeful eyes dropped. Yes, Natalie smiled at her. And if you want to, you can move in with us after the hospital. You did the right thing, Alex said. When he and Natasha left the room, Margaret was resting, finally catching up on her sleep. I hope so, sighed Natalie. Did I really have a choice? You always do. You could have just agreed to let me take care of her, provide for her at her age. But you realize that wouldn't have been enough for her. What she really needs is something else. Natalie said thoughtfully. Yes, Alex nodded. What do you need? The question took her by surprise. But when she met his gaze, Natalie suddenly realized that it seemed that the answer to that question was almost already written in the depths of her heart. She just needed to find the courage to read it and accept it. I'm not rushing, you said, as if Alex read her thoughts. But I want to know if I have a chance. Natalie was slow to answer. But Alex was very patient indeed. And eventually, and not even too late, he waited. 6 months later, he and Natalie were married. Her sons received him enthusiastically. Of course, they too had to discover the truth, but they, since explained everything to them, calmly accepted these facts. Normal. After the wedding, Natalie and the children moved in with Alex. He had a spacious 2-story cottage in the suburbs. And that's where Margaret moved in. And it turned out, by the way, that in normal conditions, when she does not stand over the soul angry Elizabeth, all is absolutely fine with her head. And she even took to helping Misha and Nick with their schoolwork. And also Margaret, though forgiven, but now did not communicate with her adopted son and his wife at all. Despite the fact that Natalie had the option of not working at all, she told Alex honestly that it would be boring for her to live like that. And so he slowly began to introduce her to the affairs of his company, which owned jewelry showrooms. The adoptive parents of Natalie's dead husband were very unhappy that she had learned their secret and were even more unhappy that Natalie might tell her grandchildren. But Natalie decided that Matt and Nick, they needed to know that they had a loving, kind, native grandmother. And another year later, Alex and Natalie had a child together, a girl. And although Alex really wanted to name her something in honor of a gemstone, such as ruby or amber, Natalie finally persuaded him to choose a more appropriate name, and the girl was named Grace. And with the birth of the baby girl, the little family felt completely and utterly happy.